This is a story about why it's so important to listen to your gut. A friend and I decided that it would be a great idea to go camping for the evening. We live in Utah, a state known for its plentiful outdoor activities, and we didn't have to venture too far out to find an amazing camping spot near to where we called home. My friend was 17 at the time. I was 18 and had freshly graduated from high school. Both of us are females, just in case you're wondering. We're both pretty familiar with being outside, and because we were relatively close to our homes, we thought we were being safe. Although doubt pretty quickly crept into our minds. We were making dinner when a man with fishing gear walks into view of our campsite from up the canyon in the river. He asked if he could cut through our site to the road. Nothing seemed unusual, so we said sure. He stopped in the middle of our site and asked us what we were making. Really, he just made polite small talk. But then his questions started to get a bit uncomfortable. How old are you guys? Where are you from? How long are you planning to be up here? Is it just the two of you here? I'll admit, some little part of me felt uneasy, but my friend and I were quite naive. We answered every single question and even offered the guy some food. He declined the food and headed out of our campsite and down the canyon. It was quiet for a couple of hours, but then that man and another middle-aged man walk up the canyon from the direction that the first guy left in and strolled right into our campsite. The first one took us up on our earlier offer for some dinner, and then he just sat there. The new guy with him, he asked a lot of questions, most along the same vein as the first guy. This only increased that uncomfortable feeling. I was uneasy the whole time, but I didn't want to be rude. After a while, they thanked us for the chat and left from our campsite, heading up the canyon, away from where we assumed they were camping. This is when subtle alarm bells became a little less subtle in our mind. My friend and I ate and sat by the fire well into the evening past dark, laughing and having fun. However, we both watched the road the whole entire time, and those men never traveled back down the canyon. Now, I can concede that they may have simply had a fishing base lower in the canyon and their campsite higher, but it's at that point my intuition screamed for me to reconsider. I was desperate to enjoy this camping trip though, and I didn't say a thing. But God, the tension was thick in the air between my friend and I. We were both uneasy and did what we could to fill the silence between us. Eventually, she said, "You know the worst part about camping by a river?" My stomach sank. Of course I knew. Here in northern Utah, where the rivers are fed largely by runoff and they traipse down steep mountains, they are loud. You can't hear anything over them, I responded to her. She just nodded. "You think we should leave, don't you?" She said she didn't feel good about the situation. At this moment in our lives, we were both staunch Mormons. FYI, I am no longer one. So we said a prayer right then and there. I now see this as me consciously and fully welcoming the voice of my intuition into my decision-making process. Clear as f***ing day, we both knew we had to get out. As soon as we really stopped pushing down that intuition in favor of having a fun night, all bets were off. Terror filled us, and we threw everything haphazardly into my car before booking it down the canyon. That terror wouldn't leave us until we got off the dirt road of the canyon fork and onto the main paved road, out of the mountains, and heading back towards town. We both watched the rear view the whole time, praying we never saw headlights behind us. As soon as we had a signal, we called my dad and told him what had happened. He was a bit off-put by two grown men trouncing through our campground and asking the questions that they did. So he told us to get the hell out of there and to make sure that we weren't being followed. We ended up sleeping safe and sound in my friend's backyard that night. Knowing what I do now, as an SA therapist, I'm almost certain those men had ill intentions for us that night. I'm glad we didn't stick around to truly find out. Quick bit of backstory for this one. Me, 32-year-old male, my brother, 28-year-old male, and disabled mom all live together in a trailer about 30 minutes from Nashville, Tennessee. I was wary of moving there at first because of the stereotypes you might hear about trailer parks, but luckily we've had zero issues in the 10 years we've been here. Very nice neighbors, well-kept yards, all that. Okay, so story time. About a week ago, we were finally putting up our Christmas tree, drinking probably too much beer, listening to Christmas music, Christmas spirit in full swing. During our random banter, my brother says, "Oh yeah, man, I can't believe I forgot to tell you. Earlier today at work, the owner had to kick out some guy who was acting super creepy." My brother works as a stalker at a family-owned little market about a mile from our home. He went on to tell me that this younger-looking guy was pacing the aisles, sometimes standing still for minutes at a time, and not responding when the owner would ask if he needed help finding something. After about 20 minutes of this weirdness, the owner asked him to please leave because he was scaring the customers, and without a word, the guy left. We continue with our good time, hanging ornaments, drinking, getting our mom involved. With the ornaments, not the drinking, of course. And all is good. We wrap up around 10:30 p.m., help our mom to bed, being that she's in a wheelchair, and decide we might as well finish off the ton of beer we have left and admire our decked out tree. At around 11:30, we decide to go out on the front porch to share a cigarette, as we usually do when we've tied on a good buzz. My brother opens the door and almost immediately slams it shut. I ask, "What's up?" And he says, "Holy shit, dude. The guy I was telling you about earlier just walked down the street past our house. Looked a bit like Michael Myers if you asked me." I thought that was pretty strange, but wasn't super concerned about it. We waited a few minutes, then went and smoked as usual, and then headed back inside. My brother and I aren't troublemakers at all, but I'm pretty confident in our ability to defend ourselves, if the need be. At this point, these are just thoughts in the back of my mind though. After all, I hadn't even seen this guy. Yet. Fast forward to about 2 a.m. We're more than drunk enough to go ahead and call it a night after one more ciggy. My brother opens the door, and within seconds, I hear him say, Whoa, hey man, you good?" I'm in the kitchen at the time, but quickly decided this doesn't sound right, and rush over to the door. What I see when I get to the open door is a younger man standing on our deck, about 3 feet from our front door. He's pretty tall, about 6 feet 4 inches if I had to guess. And another thing that I notice is that he looks a lot like Adam Driver, which was a detail my brother jokingly mentioned earlier during tree time. So I'm realizing for the first time, this must be the guy he's been talking about. One thing my brother must have not gotten close enough to notice at work though, was this guy's eyes. I'm not exaggerating when I say I've never seen anything like it. His body language wasn't super menacing, but his eyes were the strangest combination of wide-eyed bewilderment and fury. Like us opening our front door confused him, but also made him very, very angry. I joined my brother in explaining to him that it's late and he should head home. After what I'd say was about 30 seconds of staring, he just walked off without a word. I peeked out of our blinds to make sure he really left and saw nothing. We both tried to laugh it off and were saying things like, "Well, that was pretty weird, huh?" But it took a while for my adrenaline to taper off. The thing I kept thinking to myself that bothered me most was those 30 seconds to me felt like he was the one deciding what the next move would be. But what that could have been, I have no idea. I also didn't love that my brother said when he opened the door, the guy was already standing there. So, for how long? We calmed down by watching YouTube videos, and after another 30 minutes or so, I say to my brother, "Okay man, let's just go to bed. I'll take one more look outside to be safe," but felt like it wasn't really necessary. I open the door, and he's back again. The streetlights in our park are spaced very far apart, but at the edge of our driveway, there I see his silhouette, maybe 50 feet away, again, just staring at our front door. I feel I should mention he's not there texting or on the phone with someone. He's just there. I feel bad in hindsight because I'm sure this poor guy has mental health issues. But between being drunk and exhausted and the look he gave us earlier, I was just over it. I finally put some bass in my voice and said, "Hey man, you can't just stand in our driveway. You're being creepy, dude. Just please leave. I really don't want to call the cops on you, so don't make me." This seemed to work. His demeanor didn't change at all, but the word cops seemed to do the trick. He turned around and once again walked away. I hope we handled it well. I understand and empathize with people with mental health problems and have friends and family who unfortunately suffer from those things. However, I still can't shake the feeling that something bad could have happened that night. He didn't end up leaving our porch earlier that night until I showed up at the door, essentially making him outnumbered. And even then, still he came back after. I hope he's okay out there. We haven't seen him since. I also hope not calling the police wasn't a bad choice, and that he isn't out there with bad intentions on somebody else's front deck at 2 a.m., someone who may have lived alone or was elderly. I wish I could have figured out what that was all about, but during every interaction that me and my brother had with him, both during the day and the night, he never spoke a word. Pretty f***ing creepy. Back when I was a sophomore in high school, I used to be very close friends with this girl, Kay. Kay and I met in middle school, and we instantly clicked. We would hang out after school pretty frequently. Kay had a very turbulent childhood. Deceased father, foster care, substance abuse mom. And Kay's family would house hop a lot. Our sophomore year, Kay's family was staying with their step-aunt's ex-husband, or something like that. My parents never really stressed about me hanging out with Kay because she was such a kind soul and a great influence on me. Now, the man that Kay and her family were staying with, I'll call him R, was interesting to say the least. I remember the first incident that made me scratch my head. This was when we all went out to dinner with Kay and her family, and R tagged along. Kay and I were seated at the table with him, and he was venting to us about his dating life, showing us pictures of his Tinder bio and all the women that he was chatting with. We both kind of laughed it off and engaged with him, not thinking much of it. Sometimes when Kay and I hung out, R would have us come to the basement, and he had this room there that had a drum kit, and he'd play them for us with the lights off. Anyway, the strangest encounter that I personally had with R was when I had gone to Kay's house to hang out for the day, and she had gone upstairs to take a shower. While she was in the shower, I was sitting in her room, and R wandered in and told me that he wanted to show me something really cool in his room. Kay's room was on the first floor. R's room was the only room on the second floor. Being the young, naive girl I was, I agreed and followed him upstairs. When we got to his room, he realized that the door was locked, and he seemed pretty annoyed and the slightest bit jittery because his key was left downstairs. But instead of going downstairs, R takes a credit card out of his wallet and tries to unlock the door that way. Thankfully, it didn't work, and something clicked in my brain then, and I decided to go back downstairs and just sit in the bathroom with Kay until she was done with her shower. I'm 23 now, and looking back at it, I honestly don't think there was anything cool to show me in that room. And I thank the moon and the stars that he never got it unlocked. I never told Kay about this, but as we got older, I casually asked her if she had any weird encounters with R, and she said no. But there was something in her voice that intimated that that wasn't the truth. I didn't press her any further, although my heart goes out to this girl for the tough life that she faced from a very early age. When someone tells you that life isn't fair, this is the perfect embodiment of just that. I'm not sure how to end this story, except to say that I'm thankful I never got to see what was awaiting me behind that locked door. When I was about 28 years old, I lived in downtown Los Angeles with my boyfriend. We were both comedians who often traveled out of the city, but rarely together because we had a dog that we just couldn't leave at home alone. My boyfriend had left 2 days prior to do some shows in the Sierra Nevada mountains. I stayed home to watch our dog and to go to my regular job, which at the time was a bartender. One night, after closing the bar and returning home, I walked our dog, fed him, and then we both climbed into our loft bed, which was situated above our couch. I probably fell asleep around 2:30 a.m. that night, as I didn't get home till around 2 on nights such as these. We had this wonderful neighbor across the hall, a man that we affinitively called Coach, due to the fact that he was once a youth basketball coach before taking his time to enjoy retirement. Coach was a big man, large, over 6 feet easily, and filled with love. He would occasionally come over to hang out, smoke a joint, eat some dinner, and watch basketball with us. Well, this morning, around 5 a.m., I could hear Coach banging on everyone's doors in the apartment, screaming at them that they needed to get out. In my fatigued state, I don't even think that I realized he was yelling fire. I shook myself out of my stupor, gathered my senses, grabbed my dog into my arms, and headed for the front door. As I touched the doorknob, it was scalding hot. You remember that scene from Home Alone where Joe Pesci's character touches the hot doorknob that leaves an imprint on his hand? It was exactly like that. As I was able to get the door open, I'm met by a wall of black smoke. But all the while, I could hear Coach's reassuring voice, urging and directing everyone down the hall to the exit. Once we made it outside, all of us residents waited for the LA Fire Department and Police Department to arrive and investigate the house. Within an hour or so, they obtained security footage, and the police began to gradually question all of us individually, asking if we knew anything about the fire and if we would view the footage that they found. My neighbor down the hall, a girl my age, had this retrospectively sketchy boyfriend in her life. Apparently, he had broken into the building by navigating through back alleyways and hopping fences before scaling the fire escape. In the security footage, you can see him casually stroll down the hallway after making entry, before beginning to walk backwards from where he entered, dumping a 5-gallon can of gasoline as he walked. He then simply lit a match, tossed it onto the carpeted floor, before disappearing into the night, using the fire escape that he had used to enter. All of us residents watched the footage in horror as the entire hallway quickly became engulfed in flames. It wasn't until later on that we learned that my neighbor had recently dumped the man for being abusive and harassing her constantly. What scares me to high heavens is the fact that he was willing to burn down an entire apartment building just to gain retribution with her. Thanks to the rapid response of the fire department, the flames were contained to a single floor of the building, and overall the damage wasn't too terrible. While some of the residents who had the apartments right by where the flames began were unable to return to their homes, most of us were able to resume life as normal. While I'm grateful for the fire department's response, it was Coach's swift thinking and bravery that may very well have saved the lot of us. Our front doors all latched very strongly, and before I opened my door that morning, I couldn't even smell smoke. It's terrifying to think how long that inferno could have raged for before any of us would have known anything was amiss. A few weeks go by, and a level of normalcy is restored. I don't believe the cops initially found the suspected arsonist, but thankfully, he never came back. I'm unsure if this next part had anything to do with the fire at all, but it's something that left me absolutely shaken. I was returning to my apartment one evening when I see an ambulance parked by the front doors of the building. As I enter the lobby, I see Coach, flat on his back, with EMTs all around him, attempting to provide CPR. To say I was shocked wouldn't do the experience justice. I stepped inside the building, pretty much just in time to witness the paramedics halt their efforts. Coach was gone. In all my time interacting with this man, he had never keyed us in on if he was unwell in any way. I don't know if he was suffering in silence or if it was just his time. But regardless, Coach passed on 3 weeks to the day from when that fire began, and he sprung into action. Anytime someone you know or interact with regularly passes on, it's a sad experience, no doubt. But this one was harder than losing a simple acquaintance. Coach was a big personality, a big presence, and in my approximation, a big hero. While this happened a few years back, I still find myself thinking of him and missing him regularly. I tell this story not only to share a harrowing ordeal of almost having my home burned down, and perhaps my person in the process, but to give Coach the recognition that I think that he deserves. Thanks for being my hero, Coach. I hope you're resting easy. I used to be an assistant martial arts teacher at a school that taught kids aged 5 to 18. It was located on a military base, so we had a variety of students who had traveled around the world and had experienced more than most kids their age. Different personalities, open minds, and a willingness to explore were common traits among these children. There was this one little girl, though, who possessed a completely different trait. I was 20 years old at the time, and this girl, let's call her Olivia, was around 10 years old. She had black hair, a fair complexion, and was always smiling. She became quite attached to me and always found ways to get my attention. Sometimes she would run up to me, playfully hit me, and then run away giggling. Other times, she would misbehave in class out of spite, just to gain my attention. Overall, she seemed like a normal young girl, discovering herself and the world around her. That's what just about anyone would assume. However, one day, I noticed that Olivia began acting strangely, unlike her usual self. She appeared heartbroken about something, looking tired, yet both antsy and nervous. I asked her if she was okay, but she simply replied with a yes and didn't elaborate. I would have raised my concerns with her parents, but they were never really present. As the days went by, Olivia continued to appear downcast and sad. Then, one afternoon after class, she ran up to me with her familiar smile on her face, the one that always made me smile too. She handed me a folded piece of paper. "What's this?" I asked, starting to unfold it. "I drew it for you," Olivia said with a smile, giggling. As soon as I saw what she had drawn, shock instantly coursed through me, leaving me at a loss for words. A single chill ran up my spine, and my hands began to shake. It was a crude drawing of me dressed in my martial arts uniform, with Olivia depicted as stabbing me with a kitchen knife. Multiple stab wounds on my body were oozing blood, which also covered Olivia and the knife she held. Strangely, both of us were smiling in the drawing. "It's me, killing you," Olivia exclaimed. The giggle, now a full-born laugh. I quickly folded up the drawing and returned it to her. "Thanks, Olivia, but you can keep it," I said, my voice flat, still in a state of shock. She seemed wholly unbothered by the fact that I didn't want to keep her drawing, and she quickly took it back and retreated back towards the rest of her classmates. I know that it was a single drawing, and it probably shouldn't have freaked me the way that it did, but this girl had never expressed any sentiment to me that would lead me to think that she would draw something so graphic and then hand it off as if it were nothing. I didn't see Olivia again after that afternoon. She had quit the class, and deep down, I felt relieved that she had decided to quit. Even though Olivia had left, her impact remained. I was left grappling with unease that refused to subside. The image of her drawing was etched into my mind, an eerie reminder of the complex emotions that children can harbor. I don't know where Olivia may be in life now. She would be the age that I was at the time that she handed me that drawing. I hope she's a healthy young woman, mentally sound, and living a good life. I only hope that the drawing was a singular occurrence with Olivia, and no one else had to experience such a disturbing situation like I did that afternoon. Besides its effect on me, I can't help but wonder what made her draw that in the first place. This story took place on Sunday, October 29th, 2022. My father is a man named Daniel Tramouche, and I am his son, John Tramouche. I currently live near the Swiss border but reside in France, originally from Grenoble, where my entire family, my parents, and my sister live. My parents live in their apartment on the outskirts, and my sister lives in Grenoble proper. After a pleasant weekend with my girlfriend, visiting our families, we return home. We grab some McDonald's and settle in at home, ready to watch our favorite series on TV. At that moment, I receive a call from an unknown number at about 9 p.m. Generally, I don't answer unknown numbers, especially at this hour, due to harassment issues in school that left lasting effects. However, I felt a strange sensation and decided to answer, thinking that it might be important. I answer, and after saying hello, someone immediately asks, "Are you the son of Daniel Tramouche?" I, of course, answer yes. It didn't surprise me at the moment because my father has been a salesman for 35 years for the same company, and my phone number was his 15 years ago. So every now and then, I get calls from very old clients of his. We don't have the same voice, so it didn't surprise me to be asked, "Are you the son of?" After confirming, the person says directly, "Your father's been in a car accident." Panic rises in me. I start trembling. My girlfriend is next to me and immediately senses that something is wrong. I was petrified because the tone used by this stranger clearly meant to entail that my father was dead. In a panic, I ask, "Where? How?" And the crucial question, "Who are you?" They tell me that they were a witness to the accident and that my father was taken to the hospital. I continue my panic and shout, asking where? Where did the accident happen? How? The person says the car flipped. Still shaking, I explain this to my girlfriend. The stranger on the phone says that he wants to call his wife, and I hang up immediately. At that moment, I conclude that my mother wasn't with my father. For your information, my parents sometimes have significant arguments, and my dad occasionally goes for a lonesome drive. My mother has been ill for years, and she heads to bed at 6 p.m. every day, so I knew that I wouldn't reach her, but I try anyway. I call my mother, no response. I call my sister, who is more sensitive, and she proceeds to have a panic attack right there on the phone with me, screaming. I tell her to wake Mom up immediately because she's not answering the phone. At the same time, my girlfriend calls her mother to ask her to call hospitals around Grenoble to find out where my father might be. Meanwhile, I call the number that called me again, this time for more information, repeating, "Where did it happen? Where?" The person avoids the question, and after a few seconds, gives me the road number. I shout at him, "Who knows road numbers? Towards where? Which city? Which village?" He says, "Towards Angers." And then it clicks. I think, wait a minute. I was with my father at 5 p.m. I'm home now. It's impossible for him to have traveled from Grenoble to Angers in 4 hours. At that same moment, my girlfriend, with incredible reflex, hears me say, "Angers?" and immediately calls my father on his mobile My father answers disdainfully. Yes? She says, Daniel, did you have an accident? He laughs and says, absolutely not. I'm on my couch right now, watching football. At this point, I tell the person on the phone that my father is alive and safe. He says, but you're not Mateo Tramouche? I reply that I have no Mateo in my family, that my name is John. The man apologizes, but in a way that gives me this chilling feeling, as if he had achieved what he wanted, to see, or more likely hear me in a panic. I asked him 5 times how he got my number, and he never answers. He says, sorry for scaring you. I hang up, inform my sister, calm her down in the process. Later, I exchanged messages with this strange man because I didn't understand how he got my number, which is literally nowhere to be found on the internet. He told me that my number was displayed on the first page of Google in a directory. I searched the internet thoroughly that night, and it's impossible. The messages were strange. He mentioned a Laurent, even though he clearly said my dad's name. He apologized for his clumsiness, states that he managed to contact the man in question's wife, and that the man was now deceased. After a few days, my sister-in-law, who is a surgeon, told me that it's the firefighters who contact the family, not random people like that, even those involved. Moreover, when there are deaths on the road, there is always a press article or even an obituary that I would have found. I tried calling the number back a week later for answers, but the phone number was no longer connected. Was this a bad joke? Was it someone who wanted to see me in a panic? How did they get my number? Just telling this and remembering this moment still gives me a fright. This incident happened about 5 years ago, and this is a story that I never really tell anymore because most people are either uncomfortable hearing it or make well-meaning comments about what I should have done in the situation without really understanding how differently your mind works when you're experiencing absolute panic. But you guys seem to get it, so here's my story. I was living in a relatively nice apartment in downtown Memphis, working as an ophthalmic technician. I arrived home from work at my usual time, right around 4:30 p.m., unlocked my door, and went inside. I set my phone, wallet, and keys on the kitchen island, hearing my heavy metal front door swing shut loudly behind me, and I began taking care of some errands around the house. Having grown up in a small town, and much to the cringe of many of you listening, it was a habit for me to not lock my door during the day, especially when I knew my husband would be home soon anyway. I've never forgotten to lock my door once in the 5 years since this happened. I walked through my bathroom and into my large walk-in closet and began hanging up the laundry that I'd started earlier in the day before work. My front door opened, and I smiled with surprise. My husband was home a little early, and I happily called out to him, "I'm in here, love." I was met with silence and slowly began to feel that sinking feeling of something is wrong crawl right up my spine. I tried to shake it off though, thinking that my husband simply hadn't heard me, and I walked out into my living room/kitchen area. Standing on the other side of my kitchen island was a complete stranger. He was male, older than me. I would estimate in his 50s, but it's hard for me to recall exact facial features or details from this moment. And he was just standing there, staring right at me. No ski mask, no weapon, just watching me. I wondered if he'd maybe walked into the wrong apartment and was going to apologize and leave, but as he continued to stare, I realized I needed to do something other than just gape at this stranger in my house. I stood taller, puffed out my chest in an attempt to look more threatening, which is hard to do as a small female, and used a loud, clear voice, telling him to get out of my apartment and that he had no business being there. He completely ignored me, as if I hadn't even spoken. Then he began to pick up my things. My cell phone, my keys, my wallet. He picked them up methodically and put them into his own pockets. That's when it truly hit me that this person was dangerous. I was naive enough to believe this was all a mistake up until that moment. I darted forward toward the only other device I had that would allow me to get help, my computer. I had to take a few steps closer to the intruder in order to reach it, but still had about 10 feet between us, so I knew I could grab it and run before he could reach me. As I picked it up and turned to run, I saw him start to move after me, and I sprinted back toward the bathroom because it was the only place I could go and put 2 locked doors between us, my bathroom door and the closet door. I slammed and locked the first door, and within seconds, I could hear him messing with it, trying to open it. I ran into the closet and locked that door too, opening my computer and getting on Facebook Messenger to contact my husband. I sent message after message, pleading with him to call 911 and tell them there was an intruder in the apartment. He got the messages within minutes and assured me that he had a dispatcher on the phone and was leaving work himself to try and get to me if he could. I waited and waited. The bathroom door opened and the intruder came inside. He moved to the closet door and started trying to break that down too. Here's the part where people usually start giving me advice on how I should have acted. But all I can tell you is that I was frozen, with fear, with shock. I don't know with what else. But I didn't scream or cry or search for a weapon in that dark closet. I didn't brace the door or try to hold it closed. I just knelt in my closet and waited to die because I felt as if that's what was going to happen. People like to tell me that I lived in an apartment. Surely if I'd screamed, someone would have heard and come to help. Surely there was something heavy enough in my closet to use to defend myself. Hell, even the laptop I had would hurt if I swung it at someone. Why didn't I do anything? And I don't really have an answer for that. But the closet door miraculously held. I heard frustrated footsteps go back out into the living area of my apartment. I heard things breaking, bottles shattering, my drawers and refrigerator and cabinets being flung open as things were torn out of them. I continued to sit in that closet, silently crying, wanting to leave, but feeling that death was inevitable. I feel awful about my selfishness in that moment, but I messaged my mom, who lived a 15 hours drive away, and told her what was happening. I desperately wanted comfort and to tell her how much I loved her. I'm not a parent, but I can only imagine the fear and helplessness I put her through knowing her daughter was in danger, and there was absolutely nothing she could do to help. She messaged me constantly, begging me to keep replying. I told her I would, as long as I could, but I also told her to tell my brothers that I loved them, to help my husband through whatever happened next, if it were to end badly for me. The intruder started messing with the closet door again, mumbling disjointed words that I couldn't really distinguish. I remember hoping that the police would get to the apartment before my husband, that he wouldn't be the one to find me in whatever state this invader left me in. The front door opened again, and it was my husband, shouting for me. The intruder broke away from trying to kick down the door and walked out towards the living room again. That's when I took the opportunity to open the door and dart from the closet to find my husband, who at this point was on the ground with the assailant, pinning him in place. The man kept mumbling, at times yelling, but never really put up much resistance. Now this entire part is a blur for me. I remember feeling like the room was spinning, filled with fear, mostly for my husband at this point. Eventually, the police found their way to the apartment. It took them about 25 minutes to arrive, which still blows my mind. I know time seems to move slowly during scary situations, so I thought it was less than that, but from the time my husband dialed 911 to the time officers arrived, it was 25 excruciating minutes. This isn't intended to bash them in any way. It just always seemed like this was an unusually long response time for a home invasion. They got my things back from the man and took him out of my apartment. I numbly went through the process of filing a police report and telling them all that happened. One of the officers commented that I should really keep my door locked at all times. I remember feeling like he was being insensitive at the time or blaming me for what happened. But later, I recognized his words were coming from experience. I'm sure he's seen the situation end differently for other people. Within 30 minutes, the scariest incident of my life was over. But I've carried the fear, the violation, the anxiety of having someone intrude into my space for years. It happened to me once. It could happen again. If you've made it this far, I want to thank you for listening, and please consider continuing, because this isn't all doom and gloom. If this or something similar has happened to you, and you're still struggling with the aftermath of it, the sleepless nights, the laying awake listening for sounds of forced entry, the nightmares, the constant checking and rechecking your locks, this is what eventually helped me. A year after this took place, my husband and I moved to the Midwest for his job. We selected a safe town with a nice apartment complex, and we chose a third-floor apartment with only one point of entry. I looked up every statistic on crime for the neighborhood, only finding that isolated instances of car theft were the only things reported in decades. Although I still couldn't sleep at night. It was definitely better than staying in the same apartment in Memphis, but my husband often works night shifts now, and I simply couldn't continue being terrified to sleep. I realized my biggest fear wasn't that something could happen again, but that if it did, I was just as unprepared now as I was then. I hadn't changed anything other than locking my door, and I knew I would likely freeze up again and leave my life up to being able to hide well enough or having a door hold long enough to save me. And I felt that that was unacceptable. I walked into a martial arts school with an excellent self-defense program, introduced myself, and started taking classes. At first I was quiet, hiding in the back of the room and generally keeping to myself. My instructor, who is both incredibly kind and incredibly insightful, slowly built up my confidence and brought me out of my bubble of fear. After several months of training, I finally shared my reason for taking classes with him, and he's worked with me tirelessly to give me the ability to protect myself in any environment. I've been training for years now, and the difference it has made in every aspect of my life is unbelievable. The meek, quiet girl that waited to die in her closet doesn't exist anymore. I'm confident. I'm strong. I'm worthy of living and protecting myself in my home. I no longer am ashamed of how I handled the situation I was in, but I also understand what steps I can take to ensure that I'm safe. It wasn't easy, and it didn't happen overnight, but it was absolutely worth it. I recognize this might not be a solution or option for everyone. Your experience is valid, and however you decide to cope with your own story is the right choice for you. This is how I happen to do it, and it's worked well for me. This story took place in the summer of 2023. Last year, I transferred with my company to take a new position in a major Midwestern city. My spouse was still working and living back in California for the next few months, so I rented a studio apartment for myself in a newly renovated apartment building in a popular downtown neighborhood until we could look for a place together. The apartment was small, but very nice. It was in a secure building with interior hallways and a nice downstairs lobby. I was one of the first tenants to move into this newly renovated building, and other new residents soon started to move in. A major advantage of this move was that I'd only be a couple of hours' drive from my hometown and my family. I started my new job, and everything was going great. I was enjoying my new neighborhood, and the neighbors in the apartment building generally kept to themselves, just like I did. Then, a new guy moved in next door to me, and everything seemed to change. We'll call him David. David was a single man in his 60s and was very different from the college students and young professionals who lived in our building. I started noticing his erratic behavior almost immediately. I would come home from work, and he would be sitting in his car in our small parking lot, just staring off into the distance. We were having issues that summer with smoke clouds coming over from the vast Canadian wildfires. They were leaving a light dusting of ash on our cars that looked similar to pollen. David was convinced that someone was spraying this dust on his car and was accusing various tenants he would run into in the parking lot of it. He would hoard trash in his apartment and leave trash bags in the hallway, causing a foul odor to fill the building. He would also yell to himself in the hallway. I finally had enough and complained to the leasing office, although the manager was quick to dismiss my concerns, saying that she'd been in his apartment and everything was fine. In August, my parents' 50th wedding anniversary was coming up, and I was excited to go home and spend a weekend with them. A few days before their anniversary, my boss informed me that he would be flying into work on an important project with me that would have us working through the weekend. I was really disappointed and felt like I was letting my parents down, but I managed to get away for a quick overnight trip to spend the night with them in the middle of the week. That way, I got to see them and get back before my boss was due to arrive. The next morning, before leaving my parents, I checked my email as I was getting ready to head back. There was an email from my apartment manager in regard to the quote, incident the night before. The email itself was pretty vague, but it stated that a resident was deceased and there would be further details coming later. My heart sank and I immediately went pale. For some reason, my mind instinctively went to my strange neighbor, David. I opened a local news app for my city, and the top story was about an active shooter in my apartment building who was killed during a SWAT team standoff the night before. Apparently, David had approached another neighbor of ours on the hallway with a gun and threatened to shoot him. The neighbor was able to quickly evade David and run back into his apartment before calling 911. David also called 911 and told the dispatcher that his neighbors were hacking his phone, and if the police didn't come, he was going to start shooting people. The police came and tried to talk David down, but he had barricaded himself in his apartment and also claimed to be heavily armed. The state police and SWAT teams soon arrived, and David began firing a rifle out of his window at anyone he saw in the parking lot below. Strangely, throughout the night, there were reports of random gunshots emanating from his apartment as well that weren't out the window or at any of the cops down below. All of the neighbors on my floor were essentially trapped in their apartments with no way of escape. They were told to lay down and barricade themselves in their own apartments, away from the gunfire. There happened to be another building across the street with a direct line of sight into our apartment building. I learned that a police sniper took a position on the building across the street and shot David through his window when the opportunity presented itself. The police then flew a drone into his open window and confirmed that he was dead, with the gun still in hand. Luckily, no one else was injured. I returned home later that day to a bullet-riddled apartment building and a parking lot that still had shell casings strewn about. Neighbors who normally didn't speak to each other were hugging and crying and showing each other videos of the incident from their hiding places. As I went into my own unit, everything looked to be how I left it, until I went into my bedroom, where I saw 6 individual holes in my wall. The wall that was shared between my apartment and David's. Turns out, those random gunshots heard before David was downed were him firing through his bedroom and into mine, as if I needed any more reinforcement in my mind. But I can honestly say that I've never been so lucky to be out of town on a specific night. If my boss hadn't messed up my plans, I would have been home that evening, possibly right in the line of fire. I'm sorry that David didn't get the mental health attention that he needed, because he obviously needed it. But I also cannot reconcile how he put so many lives at risk. All I can say is that I'm thankful that no one else was hurt that night. The story I'm about to share is a couple of years old now. I'm a 20-year-old guy, but at the time, I was 17 years old, living a relatively quiet life in rural northern Montana. I don't party a lot or do stupid stuff, but I do love driving in the mountains. Little did I know, this could have cost me my life. In August of 2020, I was enjoying some free time on my day off from work. I decided to go take a drive in the mountains north of Kalispell. I drive this little red shitbox Nissan Frontier straight out of the 90s with a super temperamental transmission for background. The drive was pretty uneventful. Typical a-hole drivers, big diesels, northern highway dreariness. It was a foggy, cold, and rainy day, so I figured nobody would be in the mountains at this time, and I would be all alone up there. When I pulled off the main road and up the mountainous dirt road, I felt normal, like nothing was wrong other than my damn transmission. I'm heading up the road for about 2 hours until I hit a peak and get out to take some pictures. This is something I usually do for the memories. Nothing was truly out of the ordinary, and it was silent up there, other than the wind whistling through the trees and the rain. I was glad that I truly felt alone. Until I got the feeling. You know, that feeling you get in your core when someone or something is looking at you? I was just standing there motionless, listening to any noises that might alert me to someone's presence. But there was nothing, just absolute stillness. I start slowly walking back to my truck when I hear a loud boom and a sound like you hear in those old Western movies. My fight or flight was instantly in 6th gear, and I sprinted back to my truck now, started it up, and by the grace of God or some other higher being, was able to get it into first quickly and sped off. I found a spot large enough and turned the truck around and hauled as much ass as this little 4-banger could do, back down the mountain road and onto the highway. I drove completely flat out down the highway to the nearest gas station where I stopped. I was honestly bricks at this point because it wasn't hunting season. I didn't see or hear anyone else out there, and there was absolutely no way I could be mistaken for an animal. I exit the driver's side to see if the truck was damaged at all, and lo and behold, there was a single massive bullet hole. I'm gonna guess 7mm round-sized hole in the side of my truck. It went in by the rear fender and came out through the tailgate. I immediately called the county sheriff, but since there was no bullet or other evidence, there wasn't much that they could do. Nothing else really happened that day, but I haven't gone back to that area since. I know this may not be as exciting as other stories found here, but to whoever shot at me, alone, in the middle of the northern Montana wilderness, you were a terrible shot, and let's never meet. Hey everybody, it's a great pleasure for me to announce that after many requests from viewers and much work on our end, you can now find every single one of our episodes on both Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You can take our channel with you wherever you go, with episodes downloaded directly to your device, so you never miss out on a new drop. Just search for Malevolent Mischief on your favorite podcast platform. Hit that follow button and take all of our content with you throughout your day. Whether you're commuting, working out, or even just relaxing with a snack at home, tune in however you'd like to tune in. Just don't miss an episode. Again, find us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify now. Feel free to navigate over and make sure you're following while you listen to these next few stories. I'd like to thank all of you for your support as we continue to bring more creepy content directly to you. And now, without any further delay, let's get back to our program. At the time of this tale, I was 27 years old. I was living with a boyfriend, who is now my fiancé, in the same home we live in today. Our home is a small beach cottage with multiple windows on all sides. The home was moved in the 70s from a rural beach town, just a few miles from here, to our quaint neighborhood amongst sprawling brick ranches, in what I imagined at the time to be a desirable little working-class neighborhood on the edge of town. Around the time of my story, my boyfriend would take frequent trips out of town, often for work, but also on occasion to assist his older parents, who lived out of state, with their home, repairs, remodeling, etc. He'd typically be gone for a few weeks, but up to 2 months at a time. At this point, he'd been out of town for almost a week or so. I was just rolling along in my day-to-day life like normal, going to work at my 9 to 5, working out in the evening, chores, rinse, and repeat. One night, I was lying in bed, on the cusp of my sleepy melatonin stupor, when suddenly, I was jolted wide awake, with an overwhelming feeling to get up and check that all the windows of our house were locked. I thought it was a strange impulse. Other than the fact that I hadn't checked the windows since my boyfriend had left, I had no rational reason to think of the windows right then and there. No strange sounds, nothing of that nature. I begrudgingly drug myself from my cozy cocoon to check the windows. Most were locked up tight, but there were a few that had been left unlocked. I threw on the lock latches that had been left unsecured and groggily stumbled back to bed, not thinking anything else about it, as I drifted off to a restful night's sleep. The next morning, as usual, I woke up to the cringe-inducing alarm blaring from my phone and began readying myself for work. I started the water kettle for my beloved French press and stood at my kitchen window waiting for that whistle. My entire body was instantly coated in goosebumps as I noticed a single slice in my kitchen window screen. Utterly shocked, I ran to the office, then to the guest room, to the laundry room, and as I'm sure you've already guessed, every screen in my home had a single slice in it. A slice just large enough to fit a hand through. All but 3 screens out of our 18 windows in the house had been sliced. The 3 that were left untouched were the windows to my bedroom. The bedroom that I peacefully slept my butt off in while someone attempted to get into my house. By this time, the kettle was screeching at me to remove it from the heat. I ran shaking to the kitchen to answer the kettle's call, all while attempting to not keel over from the second heart attack I was having before I'd even dressed. I was freaked out beyond measure. The cops were called and a detective came out to investigate. On the backside of my house, he noticed a single large handprint on one of the windows. They tested for fingerprints and determined that the person attempting to get in was wearing gloves. He, of course, had no proof, but he also believed that the person must have known that I was in the bedroom, and that's why they never messed with any one of those screens. Nothing ever came of the investigation. I can't explain why I got out of bed that night, but now I will forever trust my gut. Follow-up. So this all happened about 5 years or so ago. I know that those slices weren't there when I checked the windows that night. We often choose fresh air over air conditioning, so we would have noticed the screens. Not to mention, my fiancé is a bit anal about these things. We have since installed motion lights and cameras. Nothing even vaguely similar has happened since that night. My boyfriend was unable to come home immediately, and let me tell you, those next few nights alone, after the incident, were the scariest evenings of my life. The police did regular nightly patrols of my neighborhood for a few weeks following this incident, but no suspects were ever found. This story is going to take me all the way back to the 1970s. Back in 1978, I was 9 years old. I lived in Bellingham, Washington, a small city about an hour and a half north of Seattle. My parents were the carefree hippie types and pretty much let me roam the streets and visit friends as long as I was home by dark. This particular day, it was late summer, and I took the bus across town to visit my friend Leslie. We would go buy candy at the corner store and walk to Fred Meyer, which was a Target-type store back in the day, to watch TV in the electronics section. My parents didn't let me watch much TV at home, so I could spend a whole day at Fred Meyer watching whatever I wanted. It got to be the late afternoon, so Leslie and I decided to part ways. I walked to the bus stop downtown, and as I was waiting, I couldn't help but notice this white car slowly drive by, and just the way the driver looked at me made me begin to shake. I watched him turn the corner. Instinctively, I knew he was going around the block, just to come back. Lo and behold, that's exactly what he did. This time, he parked across the street. He got out of his car, slowly walking up to me, and he asked me if I wanted a ride. I remember everything about him. Curly dark hair, thick mustache, and the feeling I got from him was nothing I'd ever felt before. He pretty much paced up and down the block, smiling as he walked by, repeatedly offering me a ride. He then walked back to his car and began talking on some kind of CB radio or walkie-talkie or something. He was talking to someone about me. I could tell by the way he was nodding and smiling at me the entire time he did. He approached one more time about a ride, and this time I yelled out, "No!" Thankfully, the bus came shortly after, but I knew that he would follow the bus. I went to the back of the bus and watched from the back window. He waited behind the bus at every stop. My stop was coming up. It was on a corner. I got off the bus and ran as fast as I could. I looked back once and could see the back of his car. He had obviously parked. I ran another half block before crouching down behind a tree or a bush, and I could see him standing on the corner, staring down the street, obviously looking for me. After a few minutes of not being able to spot me, he left. This is when I'm going to fast forward to January of 1979. There must not have been school that day because, once again, I found myself at Fred Meyer watching TV. A news story came on one of the TV sets. 2 local college women had been murdered by a man named Kenneth Bianchi. As they showed a picture of this man, my entire body went cold because it was him. The same guy that came up and offered me a ride several months ago. His face was all over the news for a while, but only later in life did I find out that he and his cousin were the infamous Hillside Stranglers. They had murdered young girls and women in LA, and then Bianchi moved up to Bellingham in the summer of '78. In a weird and creepy twist of fate that added to this, I learned that he had also worked at Fred Meyer. Another strange element to this is that Bianchi moved to Bellingham without his cousin. So who was he talking to that day that he tried to get me into his car? Bianchi was responsible for 12 deaths that police have proven, but he is suspected to have committed several others in his time. He currently is serving a sentence at Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla and will be eligible to apply for parole in 2025. I've held on to this story for over 40 years now, and it's one that I'm sure I will still remember 40 years from today. I hope that man never sees the light of day again, on account of all the horrible things that he did. Let me start this off by letting you know that I was living close to a metropolitan area for a little over a year before moving back to my tiny hometown. Before then, I was in college, other places, etc., and I didn't interact with anyone from my hometown besides my family for many years. I even deactivated Facebook for a few years. But anyway, fast forward to the fall of 2020. I moved into a house in the tiny town. I decided that it was a perfect night to chill and get inebriated off many glasses of wine. I was relaxing on the couch with my girlfriend when we suddenly heard someone knock on the front door. It was around midnight, so my girlfriend immediately told me to not answer it. When I got up to pull the blinds on the glass portion of the door, I saw a meek-looking girl. probably younger than 20, standing on our porch with a blanket and bag in her hand. I was shaken because in a town like this, in the Midwest, there are literally no homeless people. Or because the town is so small, people usually have a support network when things go sour. I asked her what was going on, and she said that she was homeless and needed a place to stay. My drunk self thought it was an amazing time to fulfill my need of helping the world by opening my front door to let her stay in the guest bedroom. My girlfriend immediately sat her down and began asking her questions, and the young girl's answers were pretty vague thinking back on it. Eventually, she told us she knocked on every door down the street to find a place to stay because she had gotten into a fight with her mom, so she really wasn't homeless. It is also odd to think that a young girl would do that, considering the inherent danger involved. Eventually, I found out that she went to the same private school that I went to, from 1st through 6th grade. We were kind of bonding on talking the campus because it's this new age bullshit school run by boomers. But then she mentioned that she had a no contact order for sitting at the same table as someone at the school. My drunk self did not register that no contact meant restraining order. So we're talking, and then she says that she recognizes me from Facebook. That raised alarm bells for me, especially because I've never seen this girl before in my life, and we have an almost 10-year age gap. She told me it was because I posted a local rental on the Facebook home share. It was for my mom, who was a realtor without Facebook. Okay, well, that's reasonable. Small town. But then she tells me that she knows my mom. This is another alarm because my mom and I have different last names, and she doesn't have social media or any way to connect us. Another thing my drunk self registered only the next morning. Fast forward to the morning. She says she's going to leave, and I ask her if she wants a ride home because it's cold out. As I drive down the street several miles, I realize she does live on the same street, but she also would have had to pass at least 5 developments and many rows of houses to get to my house. Was I really the only one to answer the door? Or did she target my house for some reason? The next day, my girlfriend and I both discussed how odd that was and how many things just didn't add up. Later in the day, we come back home from the store and we see that same girl in front of our house again. I'm panicking because I'm horrible with confrontation, and my girlfriend said, "You let her into our house. You deal with it." She stays in the car, and I ask the girl what's going on, and she asks again if she can stay with us. I panicked and asked her to come out with me to the car. My girlfriend told her that she didn't know if she had a gun or who she was, and she could only stay with us if she opened up to us about everything, especially why she's not going home. We sat her down in the kitchen and nicely grilled her only to get vague answers again. To be honest, initially I was concerned it was an abuse situation, but it turns out it wasn't. At this point, she's in our house, and we don't know how to get her out. By a sheer stroke of luck, she says she's leaving to go to the dining hall and will come back later. Pretty much the moment she left, we quickly taped signs on both the front and back doors that read, "Landlord won't allow additional tenants. Best to go back to your mom's." Now, it's later in the evening and dark out at this point, and we begin to hear banging out on the front door. Then we hear banging on the side door, then the back door. Finally, it stops. Both me and my girlfriend were upstairs, and we knew it was her, so we just waited it out, probably about an hour if I had to guess. I ended up walking downstairs to check because we were both starving and wanted to use the kitchen downstairs. I decided to take literally one finger and slide one blind shade up from another to peek through the kitchen glass doors. And she's standing there, facing me, in the fucking pitch black on my back deck. After an hour, no less. I looked her dead in the eye and then turned around and noped right back upstairs. More time passed, and she eventually left. When I opened the door, we noticed that she had taken the handwritten notes. As the next day rolls by, everybody's mom and cousin is lecturing/laughing at me about opening my door to a stranger, which, to be honest, I would never normally do. But the whole thing wasn't sitting well with me, and I needed more information. I posted something on Facebook about it, and a guy I went to elementary school with messaged me asking if it was insert female's name here, because she had an obsession with him that led to a restraining order. He advised me that she's probably harmless, but not to respond to her. She hasn't come back since, and I still have no clue why she truly showed up or how she knew me. It cost me the purchase of a Ring security system, but I guess it could have been worse. I feel I should add that I did ask my mom if she knew the girl, and at first she said no. But then I described the girl to my mom, and she remembered showing her a different property than the one I posted on Facebook months earlier. Although, in the end, my mom ended up renting that place to someone else. I even asked my mom if she accidentally mentioned anything about me or where I lived to this girl, but she didn't. A single fleeting thought popped into my head that maybe that girl was upset she didn't get the rental she had wanted from my mom. But how that led her to me in my home, I don't think I'll ever know. Strange story, we're no worse for the wear, but I won't be opening our home up to anybody else anytime soon. Copious amounts of wine, be damned. I'm interested in what you all think though. Why did she pick our house? What was her deal? And more importantly, what do I do with all of this? My friends, Jessica and James, have been together for 6 years and have lived in their house for over a year now. I'm over there quite often. I've been friends and co-workers with Jessica for 4 years. They're absolutely wonderful people. They've kind of adopted me, and they keep me alive by feeding me a few times a week. Not like a cat or anything, but I still appreciate the gesture. So I was over for dinner after work a few weeks ago. We all got to their place within minutes of each other. We drank, ate, and caught up. And after a little while, James goes outside to grill up some steaks. When he comes in, he asked why I had kissed the door. I'm pretty confused and head over to the sliding glass door where he is. Sure as can be, there is the imprint of a kiss on the outside of the door, lipstick, and everything. A few things here. James and Jessica are both shorter than I am. He's about 5 feet 8 inches tall. She's about 5'2". I'm 5'11". The kiss print was at a height that if I popped up on the balls of my feet, I could reach that spot with my lips. Far above where Jessica could reach, and as much as I loved the thought of James in bubblegum pink lipstick, he wouldn't have been able to reach it either. Now, I haven't worn makeup in many, many years. I don't even own lipstick. I think I might still have some mascara and an ancient eyeshadow palette, but that's about it. They both thought it was me playing a prank. After all, Jessica owns lipstick. I could have just been trying to freak them out using her makeup. But spoiler, I'm not. I am a smoker though, so I do frequent their back porch through that door. Besides, it's pretty difficult to get on their porch. We've got 3 sides, right? Well, the right side is sort of a balcony with a 30-foot or so drop. The left side, a 10-foot drop with a fence. And inside the fence is immediately James's grill and some workout equipment. It's a pretty narrow space and wouldn't be easily navigated with all that junk out there. Plus, it's pretty high up. The front of the porch would be the easiest way to get in, but you would have to be dedicated. They have thick, tall boxwood hedges along with a fence. Suffice it to say, you'd get pretty scraped up. So at this point, I'm thinking that most likely Jessica just climbed up on a chair and kissed the glass herself. She's pranking me. Well, James cleaned off the glass and we went on with our night. A few nights later, I'm back at their place once again. I was heading out for a smoke when I saw another set of lip prints on the glass, in the same place, this time with a nude shade lipstick. About a foot below the lip print, there was a smudgy heart. I'm not sure if this person had really greasy hands or if they used spit or something like that, but it was extra creepy. I pointed it out to my friends, and again, they thought it was me. James even insisted that I clean it off the glass. Jessica nor James have ever been ones to prank, and neither have I. But I still felt like the most logical explanation was Jessica trying to prank James and I by setting me up or something. The next time it happened, a few days later, when I hadn't been there for a while, Jessica called me on the phone. She was a little accusatory and more than a touch rattled. I do have a key to their house, and she asked if I had used it to kiss the glass again because when they woke up, she noticed that there was a lip print on the door. I told her it wasn't me, and she eventually let it go, but I could tell she still thought it was me. At this point, I'm not really thinking it's her. Like, it could be, but it definitely seems like it's time to give it up already. She seemed genuinely mad at me, and it didn't seem funny at all. It happened a couple more times. Once more while I was over, then there was a break for about a week, and then again, when I hadn't been there. I had to go to another state for work, and while I was out of town, Jessica video called me. She saw me in my hotel room and just started freaking out. She said this whole time she was really holding out hope that it was me. Even though it wasn't funny, at least it wouldn't be terrifying. Alas, I'm 1,000 miles away from them, and there's a fresh kiss print on her back door with that same heart underneath. She apologized to me for being so adamant that it was me. She just didn't want to be wrong. I told her it's okay, but she should probably call the police now. She did. They came several hours later, looked around for maybe 5 minutes, and pretty much told her, that's weird. They told her that she could take pictures and submit them online to the police. Big thank you to those 2 specific boys in blue. Big help. So we're all completely freaked out. I suppose it's possible that it is her or James, and neither of them know when to call it quits, but I really don't think that's the case. Someone out there is really dedicated to giving them kisses. They ordered a camera. It arrived a couple of days ago, and they put it on the porch. So far, nothing. But I'll be sure to let you know if that camera does catch anyone creeping up for a kiss. Recently, I had to make a quick run to Walmart after work for a few smaller items I'd forgotten the day before. About halfway into my trip, I was approached by a woman and a teenage girl who asked me to buy a pack of diapers for them. Now, I do enjoy helping people whenever I can, but something felt incredibly off-putting about this situation. Something about the way she strode right up to me and asked. It all felt very rehearsed. I told her no in the most polite way I could muster, and she nodded and went on her way. I was prepared to deal with potentially having turned away a woman who genuinely needed help. But like I mentioned, something still felt really wrong about it. I completed the rest of my shopping and was well on my way to forgetting the encounter, but when I made my way up to the self-checkout, suddenly that same lady and teenage girl make a beeline for me. These 2 women don't look at me or speak to me. They just walk up to the self-checkout stand that I'm at and begin to scan not only the diapers they had, but items they had hidden in their clothes, racking up a huge total on the self-checkout. Completely stupefied that she just brazenly assumed I'd paid for it all, I got the attention of the associate and quietly explained the situation, making it clear I wasn't trying to make a scene, but I simply didn't know these people, and I wasn't about to pay for their belongings now that I knew it was a ploy. He told me they've had to deal with her before, and I wasn't the first customer she had a run-in with. He put on his most patient customer service voice and talked to the woman, at which point she pretended to not speak English, despite having a pretty firm grasp on the language earlier when asking me to buy diapers for them. She just kept pointing at me as if to indicate she and the girl were with me. Thankfully, she wasn't fooling the associate who, by now, had not only cleared her items from my checkout, but placed his body between myself and the woman, who was still pretending she couldn't understand him, and still adamant that we were together. The whole time, she was getting louder and louder, and it was obvious that things were escalating. So I made a point to pay for my belongings and hightail it out of there. I hurried out to my car, closing the door just in time to see that teen girl nearly sprinting to catch up with me. The older woman, not far behind her. Panic began to set in, and suddenly I was trying to lock the doors, throw my groceries in, and buckle up all at once. The teen girl was now frantically tapping at my window, with what I assumed at first was her nail. I wasn't going to look up until I caught the sun gleaming off of something. I turned my head to find she wasn't tapping with her nail at all, but instead with the tip of a switchblade, making slow, deliberate slicing motions with it. Just about the only thing I could think to do was throw my car into reverse and get the hell out of there. And as I did, both the teen girl and the woman slowly walked in front of my car, heading back toward the store. As she was walking by, the woman turned and looked at me and gave me what I could only describe as the most sinister smile I've ever seen. Something was just so deeply insidious about the way she gave me that knowing look. A truly diabolical version of the kind of look a mischievous kid gives you when they know they're doing something they're not supposed to. I was shaken, but ultimately okay, though I'd be lying if I said I didn't look over my shoulder for a long while after that. Edit. A few people have asked if I've let the store and/or the authorities know, and I'm glad to report back that I've informed both, and they are now looking into the matter further. A long conversation with the store manager about it revealed a couple of things. For one, the associate who came to my rescue hurried outside not long after I peeled off to investigate, after he watched the two in hot pursuit of me. And according to what he said, the pair made their way back toward the store as mentioned, but changed direction to who knows where after spotting him at the door. Another interesting thing to note is that tabs have been kept on her for a while by that particular store, though this is the first instance documented where she's pulled a weapon. In any case, hopefully this will help. Stay safe out there, guys. I met this guy on a popular dating app. He's the same age as me, 25, and he teaches middle and high schoolers. He loves to cook and be adventurous. He's funny, and so on. Really seems like the whole package. And at first, we got along amazingly. We had a lovely first date. We went to a bar, got a drink, and then took a stroll out for ice cream. We parted ways after this, and he asked if he could see me again, but didn't even try to kiss me. Honestly, it was refreshing. I feel like people so often rush intimacy, so I appreciated the slower pace. We went on several more great dates over the next few weeks. My favorite one was going roller skating, followed by an arcade. Then we nightcapped for a beer and some pool. At this point, we're getting pretty comfortable with each other, getting a little handsy, making out a bunch, but mostly filling out days with fun activities. We really got into playing pool with each other and would end most of our dates this way. We were a little tipsy one night, curled up in the corner of my favorite bar, when he asked me, if you could go back and change anything about your life, what would it be? Now, I don't know why I picked this event out of everything, but I picked this one encounter I had as a child. I was a ballet dancer, and this much older man was extremely inappropriate with us younger dancers. I briefly told him the story, said that I wish it had never happened, or at the very least, that creep would have gotten kicked out. He was sympathetic and caring to the story. I asked him the same question in response. If you could go back and change anything about your life, what would it be? He glanced down and then back up at me. He let out a deep sigh and said, well, I hooked up with a 15-year-old a few months ago. Obviously shocked and not quite sure that I heard him correctly, I asked him to explain exactly how that would happen. He told me that he met her off of a dating website and had, quote, no idea she was underage, but found out after they had slept together. Then he continued to hang out with her, but did not do anything sexual. They were just friends. I asked him why he would be friends with this kid he accidentally banged, and he said that he liked the attention. Not only do I absolutely not believe that he didn't know she was 15, I mean, he spends all his days with middle and high schoolers, but I seriously don't believe they didn't do anything further. Mr. I like the attention. This was an absolutely and completely repulsive and pathetic admission. Needless to say, I didn't see him any further, and I'm glad that I dodged that bullet. I wanted to do something, take some sort of action, but I wasn't sure what to do, because I have no proof that this even really happened, nor did I know this girl's name. So I called an SA hotline and asked them for advice on what to do. The very nice lady told me the cops would be pretty useless in this situation since I don't have any concrete information. But she did say that I can contact our state's Board of Education, and they would automatically launch an investigation based around such accusations. I know that it's not much, but it's seriously the best I could do. And I really hope that he doesn't hurt any more kids. But seriously, fuck that guy. I enjoy taking solo camping trips. I find this to be an easy way for me to relax and just chill out. I went into the mountains yesterday morning and set up my tent in a campsite near a pretty popular mountain range near me. I had zero Christmas plans, so I thought I would go camping instead of sit at home. I also thought it would be an awesome time because I imagined there would be very few people at the site with me. I was correct, but a little surprised that I was actually the only person there. Everything was totally fine, and I was enjoying myself. I decided to call it a night early since I had done a pretty large hike earlier, and it definitely tired me out. At about 8 p.m., I began to clean up everything and got into my tent to wind down for the night. I passed out pretty quickly, but at about 3:15 a.m., I woke up to the zipper of my tent very slowly unzipping. Now, I'm a super light sleeper on these trips. I tend to stay on guard because, like I said, I was all alone. I also placed my head by the entrance of my tent for this very reason. I woke up, shook off the cobwebs, and immediately understood that someone was trying to come into my tent. I have a handgun I bring with me for protection, but have never fired it outside of the shooting range. Never once had I been put in a position where I needed to, but my adrenaline immediately shot up. I slowly grabbed my handgun and faced it towards the entrance. I decided to announce myself. I yelled, "I have a gun, and I will shoot you in 5 seconds if I don't hear you run off right now and leave me alone." He was silent for about a 3 count, until I heard someone starting to run off. I kept my handgun facing the entrance for another 10 minutes, just waiting to hear any sort of movement at all. I heard nothing, so I decided to grab my phone and call the police. They were about 20 minutes out, so I sat there still, in the defensive mode, waiting. When the cops arrived, I came out of my tent and announced that I was the caller. I gave them my story, and they decided to look around a little bit. Not even 20 feet away from my campsite, they found some dude trying to hide in a tree. It's winter, and the trees are all bare. Come to find out, it was some guy who took mushrooms at another campsite nearby, on one of the other sides of the mountain. He was lost after walking around, and thought that my tent was his. He was a younger kid, maybe early 20s, and I could tell he was pretty shaken up. They arrested him, and as they were throwing him in the back of the car, he yelled to me, "Man, I'm sorry about that. That was all my bad." The cops asked if I wanted to press charges, and I told the cops not to worry about it. I was pretty pissed about it, but even if this guy was lying about thinking the tent was his, I knew he was harmless and was just some dumb dude who was high. Regardless of that, they arrested him. I packed up all my stuff and left the campsite right then and there. I knew there was no way I could have just fallen back asleep, as if nothing had happened. I'm glad it didn't turn into a situation much worse than this. I wanted to share the story for a couple of reasons. One, as a PSA for those that go camping by themselves, to make sure you have your just-in-case protection every time you head out. You never know when you'll need it. And two, make sure to use your psychedelics in a familiar and safe place. And if you aren't going to do that, maybe leave some breadcrumbs back to your own tent so you don't creep out someone that sleeps with their just-in-case protection under their pillow. So I moved into a duplex with my ex about 3 years ago in what we thought was a safer part of the city. One of our neighbors, Amber, works in the duplex rental office, and her husband, Ed, was at the time fresh out of prison and had been doing and continues to do landscape work for the rentals, like mow the lawns, cut down trees, things like that. Other than that, he's home mostly doing odds and ends, things like tinkering with his mower or truck or something along those lines. They are both super friendly people, very kind and loving towards others, and always offer to help out. We've smoked some weed together a few times and have talked about all kinds of things, so I thought I could trust them and felt very safe being their neighbor. I once mentioned how sometimes when I'm home alone, I hear steps in the attic over my room and what sounds like a chair being dragged. How sometimes the noise follows me around the house and always freaks me out to the point of calling someone just to feel a little safer until the noises die down. Ed says, unprompted, "What, you think we're spying on you?" He added a chuckle at the end of that sentence, but it creeped me out more than a little. So around then, I end up breaking up with my boyfriend, and he moves out. Ed started texting me and asking if I wanted to smoke while Amber was still at work. I declined every time, finding different excuses because I still felt uncomfortable around him after that spying on you comment. Then he straight up asked if I wanted to have sex with him because he thinks Amber is cheating on him. I definitely shut that down, and it was awkward to say the least. I didn't end up telling Amber because I didn't want to get kicked out or have some horrible awkward tension, and I just hate confrontation in general, so I kept quiet. That's when I start to hear things in the attic above my room more and more often. It freaked me out even more when I woke up to a loud bang outside my front door at around 4 a.m. one morning. When I went to examine it, there was a small lockpick outside my door on the ground, but no person around. I kept the lockpick, and the next day I texted a picture of it to Amber to let her know I thought someone was creeping around. Her response was, "Oh, that's Ed's. That's his ice pick, not a lockpick, sweetie. No one can pick your deadbolt with that." But I know the difference between a 4-inch skinny-ass lockpick and an ice pick. I'm so scared to be alone here, especially at night. Our attics connect, and it's not outlandish to think he could be up there spying on me. I even found a freshly drilled hole in the ceiling of my room. I just put some wadded up paper in it and try not to think of it. I honestly hope nothing comes of this, and I'm just being paranoid, but with every passing day, I find this conduct to be less and less likely to be innocent. Edit. For everyone saying to call the police, I really have no evidence. I have the lockpick still, and pictures of my door being messed with, but when I've gone into the attic, it's been completely empty. I've never gone in alone because its opening is in my garage, and there's no ladder, so it requires 2 people. But as of now, it's a gaping hole above my washer and dryer, and very hard to get into without good upper body strength. I'd call my ex to come home when the dragging would start, but by the time he'd get here, it'd be cleared out. So I'm hesitant to report anything with no evidence. I find myself staying with my current boyfriend until I move out of this place in a few weeks, despite the fact that my neighbors are upset that I'm leaving. It's a strange feeling when you can't even treat your own home as your home. and I think that I'm done ignoring this feeling that I get when I'm there. Best to pack up and leave. I'm a girl living in Northern Europe. I won't go into too much detail where this happened because I'm kind of scared that people will recognize me from this story. This tale takes place in October when I had a part-time job in this research center. This was in a bigger city, not like in the middle of it, but it was a 30-minute bus ride from where I lived at the time. Keep in mind that the workplace was in an industrial area, so the only people that really spent time in the area were the workers from these companies. I worked all 3 shifts, mornings, evenings, and nights. But I did mostly night shifts because none of my coworkers really wanted them. And I'm a night owl anyway, so that 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. shift worked well for me. This particular incident happened on one of these night shifts. It was a Thursday night, and I was one of the 3 workers there that evening. We didn't work together. We were all in our own departments, doing different kinds of work. Also, relatively far from each other in the building. I worked at a chem lab, doing water analysis, so it was not any kind of customer service job. We were basically all alone, and it usually got really quiet and rather peaceful during these hours. We had no security guards, but it was quite impossible to enter the building without an identification card. All doors were locked, and everyone that worked there had these cards where you'd hold them in front of the sensor on the doors, and they'd open. But you weren't opening those doors without your card. You also have to use the card when leaving the building. These locked doors were not only on the outside, but on the inside of the building too. So if somehow someone managed to get through the first door without the card, they certainly couldn't get any further into the building. To the labs, for example. The door locks again immediately after you get in or out. Considering that fact, we never really had to worry about someone getting inside who was uninvited. This particular night, I took a bus and headed off to work. I greeted my coworkers that were leaving as their shifts had just ended and met the other night shifters in the women's dressing room. All normal. I was in a good mood, and so were my 2 coworkers. When our shift began, we parted ways and went to the different labs. I was 3 hours into my shift at around 1 a.m. when I decided to take my 20-minute break. 2 coworkers had gone on their break much earlier than me, so I ended up going alone this time. Our break room was this lounge where there were a couple of long tables, chairs, a mini kitchen, and a bathroom. I'm not gonna lie, this big hall with old flickering ceiling lights was not my favorite place to be alone at 1 a.m. when the whole building is almost empty and it's nearly pitch black outside. There were big windows in the lounge, but I couldn't see anything out of them, just darkness. There was always the same eerie vibe at night. I couldn't quite place it, but there was always just the same eerie vibe at night. 5 minutes into my break, I decided to head outside to smoke a cigarette. I put a jacket on, took my stuff with me, and opened the door with my card. We had this smoking area in the back of the parking lot, about a minute walk from the front door. If I said that I wasn't scared to be alone in an empty parking lot at night as a young woman, I would be lying. This was the only thing I really didn't like about the night shifts, but I really needed that cigarette. Nothing bad had ever happened, and I live in a generally safe country. So as usual, I just hoped for the best. There was this nasty white plastic chair in the smoking area. I sat in it, lit my cigarette, and from the smoking place, I could see clearly to the entrance of the building. There were bright lights above the door. Usually, I just stared at that door without even noticing it. I mean, it was nighttime in an industrial area, and there weren't many interesting things to look at. When all of a sudden, I noticed a person walking up to the door. It was a man in a trench coat and some elaborate top hat looking thing, holding onto a briefcase. I'd never seen this man before, in my work, or anywhere near this place. The man stood still in front of the door, hardly moving at all, facing it though. Even though nothing had happened yet, just this weird man standing by the door, I cannot even begin to explain how scared I was. I had to somehow get past that man to get back inside. He didn't know that I was there at that point because he didn't see me. But what if he does something to me when I'm trying to get inside? Is he trying to get inside? What does he want? And who is he? This was the only door where I could enter the building from the outside, so I had no choice but try and ignore that man on the door and get myself back inside. What on earth is this weirdly dressed man doing in this area at 1 a.m.? There's clearly something he wants from us, and I wasn't even sure if I wanted to know what it was. I started my way back towards the man and the door, while he was standing there, not knowing that I'm here in the parking lot with him. The closer I got, the more scared I felt. I had to stop and think again. I knew it was part of my job to confront unwanted people trying to get in and tell them how to contact our customer services. But keep in mind that this was past midnight. Weird man who appeared out of thin air, and me, an 18-year-old girl, alone. I had this gut feeling that I should not go to that door. I decided to call my coworker that was there that night and ask if she could meet me at the door to let me in, so I didn't have to face this man alone. I slyly crept behind my coworker's car that was in the parking lot to make the call. I was hiding behind the car in this position where I could still see the man through the car windows. I wanted to see if he would leave, and then where he went. My coworker answers the call, and when I start whispering in the phone, doing my best to explain the situation, I watch in horror as the man turns around and stares right at the car that I was hiding behind. I don't think he saw me, but he had for sure heard that there was a woman talking behind the car. What happened next? Straight out of a horror film. When this man found out there was someone behind the car, he started slowly and quietly approaching me, not knowing that I could see him through the windows of the car. But here's the thing. He didn't walk. He didn't run. He was on all fours, crawling towards the damn car. I couldn't even scream. I just froze out of fear of seeing this man crawl on all fours right at me. That's when the phone dropped from my hand. As this man got closer to the car, I see both of my coworkers opening the door, waving and screaming at me to run and come in. They didn't need to tell me twice. I made the dash and made it inside so fast that the man didn't even have time to react. When he got up and started running after me, the door was already closed. The second he heard the door lock itself, he turned around and started speed walking away, eventually disappearing into the darkness beyond the car that I had just hidden behind. We called the cops immediately, and they arrived at the front door after not too long. They didn't find anything or anyone. The man had disappeared as fast as he had appeared, and I don't think anyone has seen him since. After the shift, my coworkers walked me to the bus stop and waited with me until my bus arrived, making sure that I got home safely. Forever thankful to these lovely women for opening the door for me before that man got to me, and God knows what he would have done. There is one element to this story that I have to give proper attention to, because although the entire experience was unsettling, I think that this takes the cake. When the cops were at my job, they went searching for this guy and found nothing. I told them that I had dropped my phone when he began to chase me, and where they'd be able to find it. But after looking all around the car I was crouched behind, they didn't find a thing. I suspected that as the man took off, he saw my phone on the ground and took it with him. My suspicions didn't go unchecked for long. When I got home that morning, I hopped on my computer to use Find My iPhone, and for whatever reason, I was unable to locate it. Facing the reality that I likely wasn't going to get my phone back, I turned to Facebook to vent on what had happened hours before. As my page loads, I see tons of notifications, way more than what I'm used to getting. I think to myself, whoa. But the reason why becomes obvious almost right away. There had been a status update from me a few hours before, but there's no way it could have been me. It was made at 2:45 a.m., and I hadn't had my phone since around 1. The words in that status gave me chills, and I don't think I was alone in feeling such a way, as many of my friends had commented on it already. It read, We didn't get the chance to meet this evening, but there's always next time. Now that I know where you spend your nights, I'll be seeing you." After reading that and putting together who had made that post, I immediately called my job and requested to be put on the day shift from here on out. No, you don't know where I spend my nights, and I for sure hope not to be seeing you. This story happened in late 2015. I was working as a graphic designer for a very small startup company in rural New York State. Just 4 of us in a rented building that the owner shared with a computer repair shop. I happened to be the only female, which I was fine with. A nice group of geeky sweethearts. I'd been there maybe a month and worked closely with a web programmer. He was a young fella, around 23, and a gentle giant type. Tall, husky, muscular guy with tattoos and a shaved head, but super sweet and laid back. We'd often take smoke breaks together and shoot the shit. I didn't know much about his home life other than he'd just moved in with his new girlfriend. She'd usually pick him up after work, but if she ended up working late, he'd have to walk home by himself along the highway in the dark. When we found this out, the boss immediately started offering him lifts. I wondered what his situation was. Lost car or license? But I didn't want to put him on the spot to ask. He was kind of a shy guy in the first place. Anyway, time passes, and one day the boss wasn't in, so I offered to drive him home. His rental is a small house behind a boarded-up car wash in the boonies. You had to drive down a short, dark private road to get to it. You would actually never have known the place existed, were you just driving by. We make a little small talk for a minute in the car, finish up our smokes. I tell him that I'll see him tomorrow. And that's when things got weird. He looked at the house for several seconds, quiet, not moving to open the door at all. He said, "Yeah," in this strange, resigned voice, before slowly turning his head to look at me. Now, you have to realize, in real life, people almost never slowly turn their heads to look at you. You cannot imagine how creepy it is till someone actually does it to you. Add the fact that you're this 120-pound woman, and it's a huge guy looking at you. In a parked car, behind an abandoned car wash, in the pitch dark, with no other house in sight. And this was not the look that a guy gives you, say, after a first date when he wants a kiss. It was so very off, and not an awkward or shy kind of off. He looked at me in the kind of way you look in your cupboard when you can't decide what to eat, or if you should be eating anything at all. His mouth was slightly open, and he was staring me straight in the face with a slight squint, as if struggling hard to figure something out. But it was me who was the thing. That sudden shift of being looked at like an object, not the amiable coworker that he'd just been laughing and bullshitting with. The coworker that he had been getting to know over the past month. That truthfully scared the shit out of me. In less than a minute, he had gone from his normal self into a state of tense, dissociated slow motion. He actually looked bigger to me as well. I asked if he was okay, and after maybe 15 seconds of long silence, he looked back at the house. He either sighed or gave another resigned "yeah" before finally getting out of the car. Needless to say, I did not plan on giving him any more rides, but about a week later, it didn't matter anymore. He blew his brains out with a shotgun on the front porch of that rental house. His poor girlfriend was inside, waiting for him to finish his cigarette. It was then, from his family, that we finally got the entire backstory. This guy was newly sober after having struggled with alcoholism for more than just a couple of years. He had multiple DUIs from earlier in the year that explained the no car situation. He'd also had several serious injuries from car wrecks and blackouts over the years. The last one actually resulting in 2 small, permanent dents in his skull. The buildup of brain injuries had done far more damage than sobriety could reverse. His girlfriend admitted that ever since his last accident, he had had intrusive impulses and fantasies of hurting others and himself. And you can imagine where my mind went after hearing that fact. This is certainly my creepiest personal experience, though when I think of it today, all I can feel is sorrow for this poor kid who'd barely started his life. In the end, strong enough to fight the demons demanding others' lives, but not his own. Back when I had just finished college, I was living in a one-bedroom townhouse. I met a guy on Plenty of Fish, and at that time, I wasn't exactly smart about my online digital footprint. Not like it really changed, but at least now, I'm not as ridiculous. Anyway, he seemed like a decent guy. He was really good looking, said he had a good job, nice teeth, and looked like he cared about his personal health. All things I would typically look for in a guy. I wouldn't say that I'm a shallow human being, but I like to be presentable. And if I'm with someone, I'd like for them to be presentable as well. Well, after about a week of chatting online, we agreed to meet. We met at a restaurant downtown, which was really far from where I lived. When I got there, I noticed him standing at the door. We sat down to eat, and the evening went great. At the end of the date, we said bye, and I got into my car and began my drive home. I realized right away that he was following me. Because of the distance to my house, I wasn't immediately scared because it's a big city. Maybe he'll turn off the freeway. But he didn't. My exit was coming up, and I decided not to take it. I kept driving. I circled the entire city on the freeway, and he stayed right behind me the entire time. I was beginning to panic a bit, so I decided to go to my friend's house instead of mine. And when I pulled off the exit, I noticed that he didn't. So I had a little bit of a moment to breathe and decided, okay, screw it, I'll just go home. I took the off-ramp, made a loop back onto the freeway, and started heading back towards my exit. I got home and showered and was getting ready for bed. And that's when I started feeling dumb because, was that really him? Was I overreacting? Do I ask him if he was following me? Just a number of things were racing through my overactive imagination. So I decided that I was going to message him and just say, had a good time, good night. But when I began typing that message, all of a sudden, a message came through to my phone. A picture of my car outside my house. I nearly died. My heart jumped out of my chest. I started shaking. I didn't know what to do, what to say. And that's when he texts me and says, I didn't know you lived across the street from me. Now, I've met my neighbors, and not once had I ever seen this man in my neighborhood. There's a huge apartment complex kitty-corner to my townhouse, so maybe that's where he lived? I don't know, I feel like I'm being generous with that one. I popped up and went to look outside, and there he was, just standing there, like he was waiting for me. I opened my door, and he asked if he could come in and if I wanted to still hang out. I told him that I was exhausted and that I'd rather just crash out, as it had been a long day. The next morning, I woke up to go to work, and when I go outside, I see that the windshield on my car had been smashed. My car was keyed, my back 2 tires were slashed. And as I was noticing the damage to my vehicle, guess who pops out of his car with 2 coffees, and he says, "Oh, I thought I'd surprise you with some coffee today." So, to start my morning, I'm a bit more than just freaked out. I called the cops and reported the damage to my vehicle. This guy offered to drive me, and something in my gut was like, don't you dare get in that car. So I called my boss, explained the situation as best as I could, and told him that I wasn't going to be there until after the police came. All the while, this guy just hung out the whole time. When the police finally got there, that's when this guy started acting really suspiciously. He walked away and seemed almost as if he were hiding on the other side of his car. I filed the report with the police, and they basically said, "Hope you have insurance," and they were on their way to leave. They pulled around the corner, and as I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to get myself to work, that's when I hear the siren and the cop's lights turn on. I hear one cop scream, "Freeze! Put your hands in the air and get down on your knees." I look up, and I see the cop that I was just speaking with his gun drawn and pointed right at that creepy guy. After they have him cuffed and put in the back of the car, I speak with the cop again and learn a little bit more about the situation. Turns out, the guy that I went on a date with was wanted for stalking, breach of probation, assault with a deadly weapon, fraud, and an aggravated assault charge. I was absolutely shaken. It took me a couple of days to get over the hypothetical situations that could have happened. But about a week later, I was on my way out the door to work. And wouldn't you guess, he was sitting in my driveway once again. We live in Canada, so essentially, once you're arrested, you're released on conditions until you go to jail. I told him that I was late for work, but that I'd call him later when I was off. I never went to work that day. I went and found a new apartment in another area of the city. I also changed my phone number and hired my friend's husband and his friends to go pack my apartment up and move it to their place for a month, and then move it to my new place because I was so scared that this dude would follow them while moving. So that's my horror story about my first and last time using plenty of fish. So about 9 years ago, my boyfriend, who's now my husband, and I were driving cross-country from California to Florida. My husband had this enormous, beautiful Rottweiler named Kuma. It means bear in Japanese, and it fit. He was 110 pounds of pure muscle. I had only just met Kuma, maybe 2 days before, since my hubby and I were in a long-distance relationship at the time. So we, Kuma and I, didn't know each other all that well just yet. But he was a great boy and talked a lot. We called them the Umble Grumbles. We stopped at a gas station on our trek so that we could all get out, stretch, and use the restrooms. He got Kuma on his leash and said he'd take him for a walk. I offered to do it instead since I didn't need to use the restroom urgently. Now, I'm not a small girl. I'm about 5 feet 10 inches tall, but I am petite, as my husband calls me, maybe 125 pounds. My husband, on the other hand, is almost 6'5" and built something like a Viking. So a dog Kuma size wouldn't affect him one way or another if he tried to bolt chasing a squirrel or something. I myself will admit that I was nervous once he handed me the leash, because if Kuma decided to try anything, I wasn't big or strong enough to stop him. My husband noticed my nervousness. He just smiled and said, "Don't worry, he's well trained. He won't take off, and he won't let anything happen to you." It's important to note that Kuma had no formal protection training. He just loved whatever his dad did, and knew he was supposed to protect and keep it safe when dad wasn't there to do it himself. Once he was sure I was comfortable, my husband headed inside, leaving Kuma and I near the far right side of the gas station, with a little dirt path near a wooded area. It was very dark, and there was very little light being shed so far from the building. But it was a busy little station, and I could see people, so I didn't feel isolated or anything like that. So I started to walk slowly, allowing Kuma to take in his surroundings, when I hear a noise coming from behind me. I turn startled to see a man walking. He notices me and slows his gait, looks around, then back at me, then flashes this eerie smile. Uh-oh. He changes direction suddenly, heading right towards me. He says, "It's awfully dangerous to be out here by yourself. Are you alone?" Something in his eyes told me to run. Run. Just as I'm about to bolt and start hustling towards the people and lights at the station, I hear another sound. This one is rather new to me. As I clench my hand, preparing to run or die fighting off Creepy McCreeperson, I felt something. The leash. Kuma. In that moment, I'd forgotten that I wasn't alone at all. Not by a long shot. The sound I heard was a warning. A very lethal warning. It was the deepest, most menacing growl I have ever heard come out of anything before. That beautiful beast stepped out from behind me where he'd been observing the threat, like a giant dragon rising from the shadows. The man's creepy smile slipped right off his face, as did a few shades of color. Kuma placed his large body between mine and the approaching strangers and pressed back against me, urging me towards the Jeep. He didn't have to tell me twice. I turned and started to make my way back to the car, still holding that leash for dear life. He walked backwards, pressed against me the entire time, watching my back until we made it back to where we parked. I tried to look for the man, but he either ran back to wherever he'd come from or made it inside, taking a much longer route, well outside of Kuma's reach. I told my husband what had happened, and honestly, I'm not sure who would have done more damage to that unfortunate man had they caught him, Kuma or my husband. This story took place many moons ago, and in the time since, Kuma has moved on. But every day for the next 9 years after this, Kuma was my best friend and guardian angel. I couldn't have asked for a better protector or cuddle buddy. R.I.P. baby boy. In 2007, when I was 12 years old, my family and I took a trip to Key Biscayne, Florida, with some of my cousins and family friends. Naturally, while at the resort, my cousins and I would spend time at the kids club, where there were always a bunch of kids to hang out with, epic chicken fingers and ranch dressing, and fun games for us to play. There was the director of the kids club who watched us and facilitated all of the activities there. His name was Dan. In retrospect, Dan was a major f***ing creep. He was around 40 years old, tall and skinny, and was badly balding. The worst part is that sometimes he had us call him Dan the Animal Man. Side note, these sort of memories leave me in awe of just how naive and blinded to danger I was as a kid. If I ever met this guy now, I wouldn't want to get within 5 feet of him. Yet there I was as a 12-year-old, thinking he rocked. Time is a wonderful thing for these realizations. Anyhow, I digress. It was made clear to all of us that for unknown reasons, Dan was leaving the hotel in a week. None of this fazed me as a kid. But on our last day at the hotel, I lost my cell phone. It was a bright blue, chocolate cell phone, if anyone's old enough to remember those. I quickly told my parents that I couldn't find my phone, and considering this was already the second phone that I would have lost that year, my mom yelled at me and told me that if I didn't find it, I'd be grounded once we got home. I hurriedly ran around the hotel looking for my phone, and along my way, I went into the kids' club to see if anyone had found it. The room itself, that was typically bustling with kids and activity, was eerily quiet and empty. But Dan was there, sitting on a couch, all by himself. "Hey Dan, did you by any chance see my phone?" I asked. Dan responded emphatically, "Yeah, I found it and put it in the lost and found in the basement. Come with me." Thinking absolutely nothing of this, I mindlessly followed Dan as he led me around the back of the hotel. We walked for about 3 minutes and arrived at the foot of a stairwell leading into the basement. We were standing at the back of the hotel in a strange area, and there was no one else in sight. "It's down there?" I asked, obviously confused. I was staring down a long flight of stairs leading into absolute darkness. The walls were made of unpainted concrete, and it looked like no more than a storage area, let alone a basement with a lost and found. Dan nodded and held the door open for me, motioning for me to head down the stairs first. Something in my 12-year-old self suddenly woke up. I'm not sure if it was instinct, fear, or just luck, but I immediately knew that I had to get the hell out of there. Before Dan could say or do anything, I blurted out, "Never mind, I think I left it with my mom," and darted away from the stairwell and back to the hotel lobby. I was so rattled because something about that situation didn't feel right. I knew somewhere in the back of my mind that Dan was going to hurt me. And as a kid who wore rose-colored glasses and was overly trusting of others, this really meant something. I tried to compose myself and figured I'd investigate a bit more. I walked up to the concierge of the hotel and asked them where the lost and found was, because I had lost my phone. The nice woman at the front desk told me that the lost and found was right there, at their desk. She then asked me what kind of phone I lost, and after I told her it was a blue chocolate flip phone, she smiled and pulled it out of the box under her desk. "Here it is. Someone turned it in earlier." She handed me my phone. "Wait, you're telling me the lost and found isn't in the basement?" I stammered. "No, sweetie. The hotel is under construction right now, and the basement is just being rebuilt. There's not even electricity down there." This scared the absolute shit out of me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this man, Dan, was incredibly dangerous. At the time, I was sharing a hotel room with my cousin, and she was the only person I told. Considering that she was only 8 at the time, I think I really freaked her out. I'm now 26, and I still think back to that moment and wonder, what if? What would have happened if I went down in the basement with Dan the animal man? It truly feels like one of the most critical junctures of my entire life, and I'm so very happy that I knew to get the hell out of there before it was too late. I recently contacted the hotel to inquire about a past Kid Club employee named Dan from 2007, just to see if he's still around or on some sort of list, or possibly in jail. I told HR this whole story, but they still refused to give me any information about him. To be honest, they sounded a little sketchy about it as they did. I'll continue to do research, and if I ever find more information, I'll definitely add to this post. This story took place about 15 years ago, when I had just come home from college on winter break. Home this time was not the house that I grew up in. My parents had just recently moved away from our small city and out into the rural parts of our county, so it just didn't feel the same to be in a different space. Maybe that's what triggered my worry that night. In my family, I'm always the one thinking of worst-case scenarios, generally distrustful of others, and mostly seeming like the annoying worrywart. Call it what you will, but in certain situations, it's also the gift of fear. One cold night, my parents had gone to bed upstairs, and our big dog had followed suit. I thought I'd watch TV in the living room for a bit before going to sleep myself, and I settled in on the couch. The living room was in the front of the house, and with the recent move, the shutters on the window weren't there at the time, only see-through curtains that weren't really drawn. I noted this, but was used to our old house, where the only ones who could see in were the neighbors that we knew so well. I'm watching TV for about half an hour when the screen just cuts out. The entire TV goes snowy. Back then, my parents didn't spring for the extended cable package. You just watched whatever your local channels brought you. I looked up from whatever I was doing to distract myself at that moment. Texting maybe. At first thinking, well, that sucks the TV went out. But even as I formulated that thought, something felt off. I tried the remote, but no other channels worked. And so I was just sitting there, thinking about what I should do instead. When all of a sudden, my cat jumps up onto the windowsill and starts wailing. Now, this may seem innocuous, but anyone who knew my cat knew that this was not par for the course. He was pacing and wailing at the window, and that's when a feeling of dread washed through me, and I found myself frozen on that couch. The feeling of dread is one that's so fiercely visceral that all I could do was think, what the hell is going on? What's out there? I try to settle myself down in this unfamiliar dark house, and by some stroke of luck, I was able to do just that. But then, there it was. I swear on all I have in this world that this cold waft of air blew right through the house, and that's when I heard the side door open. At this point, I didn't even realize that this house had a side door, but I heard it, and I felt that burst of air. I instantly became unfrozen, and that's when I bolted. I run upstairs to wake my parents and slumbering dog, and I frantically tell them that someone is trying to get in the house. They, I think, were a little bit annoyed. I'm a worrier, remember? But still, they get up, and I think they try to placate me by looking around the house. They go check all the rooms, including the basement, while I'm both scared and exasperated. They are sleepily roaming about into dark rooms unarmed, when God knows who has probably made it inside already. Well, they didn't find anything. They just verbally patted me on the head and said goodnight. Needless to say, I felt foolish. That is, until the next morning. I don't know what prompted my parents to call the police, but sure enough, 2 officers showed up and asked me how I knew someone was out there. I start answering. Well, the cat was meowing a lot on that windowsill, and that's when my voice kind of just trailed off, waiting for the reaction that I usually get, which I got. The cop smirks. A cat, huh? Okay, bruh, get on with it. He goes on to say that someone cut the cable wires on the side of the house, that either the someone or someones thought they were disarming some alarm, or maybe they saw me sitting and watching TV and wanted to mess with me. And the side door? The muddy ground around the side of the house gave us the ability to see fresh tracks leading right up to it. The door itself didn't look like it had been messed with, but I know what I heard, whatever that was. I knew it, I said to my parents. The triumphant feeling was short-lived though, when I start to mull what I was so sure about had been true. True, I knew that someone was outside of our house in the dead of night the night before. True, I knew that our cable line was purposefully cut. What I didn't know, and still don't know to this day, is why these things were done. If I close my eyes, I can still feel that cold gust of wind sweep over me from that night. Did they make it in the house? What scared them off? What was the plan? All I know for sure is that when I visit my parents, who still live in that same house now, I check that side door every night. I also pay special attention to any strange cues that I pick up from the pets in that house. You know, just to be cautious. So this is something that I don't normally share, as it still makes my skin crawl to this day, but here goes. My mom used to be a nanny for a very wealthy family back when I was a kid. The parents of the kids preferred that my mom watch the children at their home, and compromised in allowing her to bring me with her to work, since she had no one to take care of me at home. During the years, my mom acquainted herself with their housekeeper, but always kept a distance because the lady seemed a little bit off. But my mom is so damn nice that she gives everyone a chance. Well, as the years go by, this housekeeper lady begins to tell my mom that I was such a beautiful young girl, and so smart, etc. Blah, blah, blah. She then begins to mention her son more frequently, in which case my mom would change the subject because she had an idea where this conversation was going. But this woman was relentless. This lady would always say how her son loved to write and to draw and how handsome he was, but she wouldn't share much more than that. And to be frank, we really couldn't care less. Mind you, I was only about 13 at this time. My mom asked her bluntly one day, after becoming uncomfortable with the constant flaunting of her son, "Why do you keep mentioning your son around my daughter? Are you trying to set them up or something? Because she's too young for any relationship, if that's the case." Housekeeper lady instantly became defensive and said something along the lines that she had the right to talk about her son whenever she wanted to, and she was allowed to talk about his amazing talents, which I guess was true. My mom and I tried to move on from the subject and thought that maybe we were overreacting, so we tried to not let it bother us again. Fast forward a few months, and it would be hard for anyone to make the case that we were the ones overreacting. I remember that it was a weekend, maybe around 8 or 9 p.m., and I remember being at my dad's house because I spent weekends with him and my half-siblings. My mom calls my dad crying and terrified, and she tells him to make sure that I don't leave his sight and asks for him to be on high alert. She said she called the cops because a man came knocking on the door, asking for me. She said this man looked no younger than 30 years old. My mother expressed how angry she was at first thought, thinking that I'd been talking to this man behind her back. So she asked, "Who are you?" His response? "Oh, my name is Mark. In fact, I think you may work with my mom. Your daughter and I have been talking. She happened to give my mom her number so that we could text, and we're supposed to be catching a movie and dinner tonight." In case you didn't catch that, he admitted that he was the housekeeper lady's son. My mom immediately knew that he was lying and began shouting for him to leave. She knew very well that I'd never spoken to this man in my entire life, let alone agree to go out with him. He continued to hound my mom and became irate, insisting that we had planned a date for that night. Luckily, my older brothers were visiting with my mom and called the cops before confronting this man, which almost led to a physical altercation. But the guy fled to his car the moment he saw my brother stand up and go to meet him. Of course, he left the scene before the cops got there. And coincidentally, that housekeeper lady never showed her face at my mom's job again either. The only explanation we have as to how he could have found my mom's home is that his mom followed her after work or something of that nature, as my mom never shared that kind of information with anyone. While my family's involvement with this story ends here, this whole series continues down a horrific path. Fast forward a little more than a year from the night that that man showed up on my mom's porch. I get home from school one afternoon to find my mother in tears, absolutely shaken in our living room. I have no clue what's going on, so I ask her if she's all right. Through tears and fevered breaths, I'm finally able to make out what she's trying to tell me. She was reading the paper shortly before I got home when she read an article about a 37-year-old man who had been sentenced to 28 years in prison after being caught in the act of assaulting an 11-year-old girl from our community. While that story would be enough to shake anyone, it was the photo of the perpetrator that sent my mom spinning. Although it was in black and white, my mom easily made out that it was that guy that knocked on her door about 12 months previous. This guy had a particularly ugly record and was clearly on the hunt for someone young and vulnerable, and it seems as if his evil mother enabled his behavior. Although my mom did report the creep's mom to the cops the night that her son came looking for me, we have no idea whatever came of that lady. I just wish that guy would have been caught before ever being allowed to lay hands on a poor innocent girl. And I can't help but think that he would have most likely done that to me, had the circumstances allowed. This story starts way back when I was in middle school. I met this kid who I'll call Chase for anonymity. Chase was a new kid in my English class. He looked like a typical skater BMX type of kid. Long, floppy Bieber-style hair, and wore shirts and hats that had the Monster logo on them. For the first week or so, we didn't really talk or interact with each other. At lunch, I would always see him eating alone in the cafeteria. I would just watch him sometimes. His mannerisms and the things that he'd do were a little intriguing to me for some reason. One day, I was coming out of the bathroom when I see him harassing some 6th grade girl and trying to get her to make out with him. It didn't register to me that what he was doing was wrong. I actually thought he was cool for doing it. I know, sounds bad. He looked over at me smiled, and then walked away after the girl walked back into her classroom. The next day in English class was when we first began interacting with each other. I had to do a book report on Of Mice and Men, and when he saw me reading the book, he gave me his notes and told me to just copy his work but to change it up a bit, so as not to make it obvious that I copied him. He said that the reading was really boring and that he just skimmed through the plot of the book and movie on Wikipedia instead of actually reading the book. I thanked him and was genuinely thankful, as I didn't like reading that much either. I actually love that book now. Eventually, we would start hanging out outside of class and would have lunch together regularly. He told me he was interested in riding BMX bikes and motocross, so my earlier assessment of him was right, I suppose. I wasn't really into that stuff, so I just nodded my head and tried to act like I was genuinely interested in what he was saying. The whole time he'd talk, I just admire him for some reason. For what it's worth, I'm a straight male, never been attracted to dudes, so it was kind of weird being so drawn to him the way that I was. We started hanging out after school. He would come over to my house every day. At this point, he had completely won my mother over. He would always compliment her on the way she had the house decorated. He would compliment her cooking and would talk to her about the show Teen Mom 2, which my mom really liked to watch. And apparently, so did Chase. Over time, I started going over to his house as well. I wasn't as outgoing as he was, so I didn't immediately hit it off with his family. But they were nice people, and I liked them all the same. Chase would always argue with his mom. One time, she told us to go hang out outside because she didn't want us playing Grand Theft Auto all day. This seemed to really piss Chase off, and in one motion, he turned around and hurled the controller at her, cracking her right in the forehead. I was sent home shortly after this, and as I was walking down the driveway, I could hear him screaming at his mother and calling her all kinds of horrible things that I won't even repeat here. The next day at school, he walked up to me at my locker and apologized for what happened at his house. I asked him if his mom was all right after being hit with a controller, and he said she ended up going to the ER to get stitches. He then said, "Too bad I had to do that, just to get the bitch to shut up." As more and more time progressed, I started spending more and more time at his house. His attitude towards me began to change. He would ridicule me for the clothes I would wear. I had a propensity for wearing black and wearing my favorite band shirts. In addition, he would call me an emo faggot pretty much every day. One night, when I was spending the night at his house, he said he wanted to play a game. The game was just called Hide and Seek Tag in the Dark, and he would be it. So first round, we turn off all the lights in his house, and I hide while he counted. Keep in mind, this was his idea, not mine. I thought it was weird that we were even playing this, given our ages at the time. Nevertheless, I find a hiding spot in a crawl space under the staircase, and I wait patiently. The house was pitch black and completely dead silent. Let me just tell you that the atmosphere in the house was something straight out of a horror movie. I felt extremely uneasy, and I felt the hairs on my arms start to stand up. I couldn't hear a damn thing in that house, when all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I hear this creepy-ass laugh coming from outside the crawlspace door. The door was cracked open, and I could see Chase peeking in. He says in a low whisper, "You're f***ed," before yanking the door open and opening fire. A barrage of BBs are flying at me all at once. I didn't know they were BBs in the moment, so I literally thought I was being shot with actual bullets. The pop, pop, pop resembled an actual gun, so I was none the wiser. He had emptied an entire magazine into me, and I was in so much pain that I couldn't move. Once the pain subsided, I just left without saying another word to him. At school, he would stare at me and follow me to all of my classes. He would try to call me and text me, but from that point on, I would always ignore him. Eventually, he decided that it would be best to just leave me alone, and a few years went by before I heard about him again through a mutual friend. We were now juniors in high school, and this friend would recount a story that would both shock me while leaving me completely unsurprised. Allegedly, that Chase kid shot his girlfriend in the face after a dispute over a cigarette. After shooting her, he simply stepped over her bleeding body and walked out the door before going on the run. At the time that I was learning about this, nobody had seen or heard from him, so it was assumed that he was hiding out somewhere. Although to my knowledge now, years later, I don't know if he was ever taken into custody at all. His girlfriend ended up surviving and making a full recovery, at least as recovered as you can be after someone that you care for shoots you and leaves you for dead. I find it extremely unsettling to this day that even in childhood, I was best friends with such an obviously psychotic individual. And Chase, wherever you are today, I pray that our paths never cross again. This happened a little while back, when I was no older than 15. I'd just discovered the rebellious act of sneaking out. This was probably my 4th or 5th time doing so. And this one night, I decided to go and meet up with my boyfriend. At this point in time, we weren't together, but we did like each other. And you know how that goes. When you're with someone you like, you tend to not really pay attention to what's going on around you. The night starts out fine, and we're having a good time. I don't remember exactly what we were talking about because we had gotten pretty high, but I do remember what happened. We'd met up and gone to this elementary school that had a decent-sized field on it, with some hills and trees towards the end. It's important for me to explain this in order for you to understand how the things went down. From where we were sitting, we had a clear view of the school, as well as the school's basketball court. The school was illuminated from the side lights, so we could easily see if anyone walked by, but it wouldn't have necessarily been easy for people to see us. To our left was a little pavement path that led into a townhouse complex. So there we were, sitting there at the edge of the field, looking at the stars and talking about random shit, when we start to hear the crunch of gravel coming from the school. Because we were high and paranoid, we immediately turn our attention to the illuminated basketball court. We watch as this guy walks by with his bike and doesn't seem to notice us. After he passes, we almost instantly forget about him and resume our talking, laughing, and overall, just being a bit too loud. Perhaps 10 minutes later, we hear that same crunch of gravel, so we go silent and turn our gaze towards the school. Once again, it's the bike guy. But this time, once he reaches the basketball court, he doesn't keep walking. Instead, he stops at the edge of the field we're sitting on and just stares out at it for maybe a minute or so, almost as if he was investigating where the noises that he heard were coming from. Now, we're a little creeped out at this point, so we begin packing up our things to leave. Then, this dude begins walking towards us. Once he stepped out onto the field, it became much more difficult to see him, as the light from the school only lit up so much. We take this as our cue to leave, and the only way to leave without being extremely visible is to take the path into the townhouses. So that's what we do. We try our best to be quiet, and we walk through the pitch black path that leads to the townhouse complex. Keep in mind that we are not sober at this point, so we're a bit extra freaked out. I check behind us constantly, and for some reason could not shake the feeling that something bad was on its way to happening. We finally reach the end of the pitch black path and make it into the decently lit townhouse complex. We ease up a little bit and begin trying to find our way to the main entrance and exit, because that's the closest way out, besides the way that we just came in. We're walking through the complex and begin talking once more, when finally we turn the corner that's going to take us to the exit. And just as we're about to leave, we see the same guy with his bike right at the entrance gate, We all stop for maybe 2 seconds. And that's when this guy drops his bike and darts right for us, insanely fast. I mutter a quick, "Oh, and my boyfriend and I begin sprinting as fast as we can away from this guy. We turn random corners and go down little back alleys, not once checking behind ourselves. I don't know when or where we lost him, but when we became tired and took a stop behind some bushes, we both noticed that there was no man in sight. We stay in the same spot for about 20 minutes, doing our best to calm down. At this point, we've both been pretty much scared back into sobriety, so we decide to try and leave again. We begin walking through the complex once more, and when we make our way back to the main entrance, we can both clearly see that man's bike just laying where he dropped it. No guy in sight, but it's odd that he would leave and not take it with him. We survey the scene as best as we can, without full-on announcing our presence, when, after a solid minute of investigating, we make the decision that the coast is clear, and we better take the opportunity to leave now. Looking back, it was a sketchy choice, because that guy very easily could have been waiting and watching from somewhere nearby, until his chance to rush us presented itself again. We quickly crept by the bike and out the gate, all the while listening for any inkling that we were being chased. Luckily, nobody followed. We both made it home safely that night, but I'll never forget the feeling of my heart sinking when we saw a bike guy blocking our way out, and when he flung that bike and took off right at us. By far, one of the creepiest things I've ever experienced in my short life. While I have to keep this post very general, I have the need to share it. Long post and first timer, so please be kind. Also, keep in mind that I was 22 years old at the time of this happening, and not even out of grad school when it all went down. I'm a therapist, and while I was in grad school, I began an internship that provided group and individual counseling to a halfway house. This halfway house was run by a church and their well-meaning congregation, but it was a bit of a mess. After several months of working with them, I got a phone call from the quote, house parent that said none of the residents were willing to attend group sessions if their new housemate would be involved. The house parent made some comments about typical house drama, so I wasn't too worried about it, and just told them to go ahead and bring the residents to the clinic, and I would work with the new housemate privately to figure out what was going on. I met with the new housemate first, and they seemed a bit reserved and untrusting, although nice. When I asked about issues in the house, they gave a small, curved smile and a raspy chuckle that was near a scoff. I pushed them a bit further, but all they would say was that the others were scared. We ended our session agreeing to meet weekly. I had the group session next, new housemate not included, to get a feel of what was going on from the others. When I walked in, I could tell that there was something seriously wrong. Their faces looked terrified. Their general appearances were disheveled, and they were all looking anxiously around at each other. I asked what was going on, and no one immediately answered. They asked me what I thought of the new housemate, and I redirected back to them. The anxious eye contact continued. I asked again, and reminded them that change and growth couldn't occur without honesty. Finally, one of them started talking, and here's the story from that perspective. We were told that we were getting a new housemate that we weren't supposed to have much interaction with, and that they wouldn't be here for long. No one would give us any information about why the new housemate would be getting the only private bedroom, or why they wouldn't be participating in class or group activities. They just told us to leave them be. This went on for about 2 weeks. Then they started letting the new housemate hang out and participate in things. The new housemate would make some strange comments that would make us feel uncomfortable, but we were to just ignore them. New housemate wouldn't sleep. they would always leave their bedroom after they thought everyone else was sleeping, head into our rooms, and check to see if we were actually sleeping by holding their finger under our noses. Then they would leave and walk through the backwoods behind the house. Now they would always be back in the morning, and we would tell the house parent, but that's when we'd be told to be quiet and to not talk about this with anyone. One night after dinner, we turned on the ID channel, and new housemate was watching with us. A few minutes into the episode, they got up and walked into the woods, which, like I said, is something they'd usually do super late at night. A few minutes later, we heard it. Their name in the episode. We couldn't be sure, so we went to the computer and checked. And that's when we saw that they had been convicted of torturing and murdering several women. There's more details to the story that I can't share here, but needless to say, my new client was a convicted serial killer that raped, tortured, and murdered at least 3 women in our area. This person was being let out on a technicality that affected several of the murders they were charged with, so they got released early on the condition that they lived under supervision. This particular halfway house was being paid to hold this person until a more appropriate structure was in place. After I had done my own research and confirmed, I went to my supervisor and professor, and the contract with that particular church and halfway house was terminated. Now, the icing on the cake? The next year of my life was absolute hell, as I was stalked, had my home invaded, my dogs injured, my house and car vandalized, and several survival items that didn't belong to me were found in my attic that made it look like someone had been living there. I would come home in the evening and find that the house would look different than the way I left it. The police came to my house over a dozen times through that year and did nothing. So my family hired a security team and installed cameras for me. 6 months later, a perpetrator was arrested on my property, and eyewitnesses and evidence linked him to the crimes. Perpetrator had been out of prison for just over a year on rape and kidnapping charges. Now, I implore you to guess who was from the same small hometown as the man they arrested? My client. Edit. Here are some answers to a lot of the questions that you've posed here. This incident was over 10 years ago, and my stalker is still in jail. I had just bought the house the week prior to all of this starting, so I couldn't really move anywhere else. I didn't have the money. Several friends offered to let me stay with them, but police and my psychiatrist believed that the stalker would follow me because he was already fixated on me. I have no idea if that's how it works, but I listened then. My brother, dad, and several friends rotated staying with me for several weeks. There was no evidence of a connection between the stalker and serial killer besides the town that they grew up in, but my brain sometimes begs me not to believe that. I lived in that house alone for another 3 years, then got married and lived there for 2 more years with my husband. I never felt at rest in that home, obviously. We're in a new house now, and with the help of lots of dogs, cameras, home security, and a great therapist, I think I'm doing much better. Though, I do have night terrors from PTSD on occasion. The reason I was told that they weren't stopping serial killer from walking was because they were about to be transferred and the house didn't want any big scenes or drama when the person was going to leave. Which doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but whatever. In terms of who this person is, I left out or changed up 2 major details that would be easily Googled to find out who they are. Happy hunting. When I was 5, my family attended a church with 2 stories to it. Downstairs were the nursery and Sunday school rooms, and upstairs was the main church room where the service was held, as well as some offices, a kitchen, and a library. The main doors of the church opened up almost directly to the stairway connecting the two levels. After Sunday school, kids would either continue playing downstairs until their parents came to get them, or if they were old enough and impatient to go home, like me, would go find their parents upstairs and try and convince them to stop talking and leave. My mom would spend what felt like hours talking to people after the service, so sometimes I'd go up and down the stairs a couple of times, up to ask if we could leave, back down to play when she said not yet, repeat again every 10 minutes or so. One Sunday, during one of my trips up the stairs, there was this elderly couple standing outside the glass doors, smiling and waving at me. I remember thinking maybe they'd been locked out somehow and wanted to come back in, which was a silly thing to think since the doors were never locked during the hours that the church was open. Wanting to be helpful, I went and opened the door and told them they could come in. Turns out, they didn't want to come in, and instead told me that they were my grandparents, there to pick me up. That confused me as I was familiar with both sets of my grandparents, and these people were not either of them. I told them that no, they weren't my grandparents. At that point, I was thinking that maybe they had confused me for another kid and said so. They then quickly stated that they meant they were my great-grandparents, and we hadn't met since I was a baby, so I wouldn't remember them, and that my parents had asked them to drive me home, since they were busy with the congregation. Even if I hadn't been smart enough to realize that they could have just come in if they wanted, their story seemed a little bit more than just odd to me, and even as they protested that it wasn't necessary, I said I was going to go ask my parents, and headed up the stairs immediately. My mom was still talking to a group of other churchgoers, but after literally tugging on her sleeve for maybe about a minute, I was able to get her attention and announced loudly, and at that point probably impatiently, that my great-grandparents were there to pick me up, and asked if I was supposed to go with them. She looked confused, then concerned, and told me my great-grandparents were not there to pick me up. It's impossible, since they were already deceased, which pretty quickly put a stop to the discussion about raising money for a stained glass window for the church or whatever she was talking about beforehand. My mom and some other adults went back with me to the door, but the couple was no longer there. Since I couldn't really describe them any better than old, white hair, looked friendly but not my grandparents, it was just sort of uneasily put down to them mistaking me for someone else. From then on, despite my impatience to leave, I stayed downstairs until my parents came and got me. I remember being concerned about it for a while, but my mom would discourage discussing it, saying that those people obviously just made a mistake. I suppose it is possible that that's all it was, but I've always remembered that it felt wrong, how insistent they were, that they were there to pick me up. I guess I'll never know for sure, although I'm glad that even as a kid, I knew not just to leave the church with them. A couple of years back, my husband and I took a trip to Yosemite. We stayed outside the park in El Portal. One evening, while we were driving back from the valley, I noticed the headlights of our car caught what appeared to be somebody lying down on the side of the road, both feet pointed towards the street. I told my husband that there was a person laying back there in the pitch black on the side of the highway. He knows that I love my true crime stories and was absolutely certain that what I had seen were trash bags. But I was sure what I saw, so I just kept saying, "No, I saw a body, and I know that was a person." We made our way back to the hotel, and as we were about to park, my husband looked over at me and said, "You're really sure about this, aren't you? Do you want to go back?" I was desperate. Yes. As we drove by again, I saw that same set of feet. I had my husband turn the car back around and yelled at him to stop the car. He rolled down his window and said, "Are you okay?" But there was no answer. One more time he yelled, even louder, "Are you okay?" When suddenly, a woman dressed in all black sat straight up. She was wearing a nice down jacket, black pants, and had her purse with her, plus 3 water bottles. Her makeup was done nicely, and she seemed very sweet. I could tell my husband was absolutely shocked by this. I asked her where she was headed. She said that she was trying to get to the Chevron station up the road, and that her mom was going to meet her there to pick her up. This woman looked to be in her late 40s, just for context. I knew something weird was going on because where we found her, the Chevron gas station was still another 7 miles away. She said that in her mind, she thought it was only about a mile from her hotel, and that it was a distance that she could walk. We offered her a ride, and she climbed right into the back seat, although not before I grabbed a thick scarf to wrap around my neck and some pepper spray. As we drove, we tried to ask her questions, just a little chit-chat. I asked why she was laying on the side of the road. She said she had gotten tired of walking and had simply laid down, ready to give up. It was winter out, and she had no hat or gloves with her. I could tell that she was very fragile. Maybe not in a physical sense, but mentally, that's what kind of keyed me in. Once we arrived at the Chevron station, she thanked us and hopped out of the car and sat on a bench in front of the closed Chevron. We offered to stay with her until her mom arrived, but she said she'd be fine. I reminded her that there was no cell reception in the area and triple-checked that she didn't want us to wait with her. She passed at every opportunity we gave her. So we packed up and drove back to our hotel. That's when I noticed that there were now 2 police cars in the parking lot. They hadn't been there the first time we arrived back from the valley that evening. I told my husband I knew they had to be there for that woman. I calmly walked over to one of the cars and asked if they were looking for that woman. The officer told me that they were and asked if I'd seen her. I explained the situation and that I really felt like the woman had something very bad happen to her. He thanked us for picking her up and giving her a ride. He couldn't tell me what had happened, but thought her leaving and going somewhere else was a very smart choice. I asked that he go check on her at the gas station just to make sure she was okay and that her mom did finally arrive. I'm realizing that whatever happened at the same hotel that we were staying at. Later that evening, I looked up the local police log and found that a domestic violence dispute had broken out at the hotel. The woman involved had been beaten very badly, and she was so terrified that she was willing to walk in the dark without a flashlight just to escape. It's my guess that after walking about a half mile from the hotel, she was in so much pain that she needed to lay down. I got the feeling like she thought that she may actually die there. She couldn't go back to the hotel because she had already escaped and gone to the front desk to call her mom. Her husband, or whoever it was that she was running from, knew that she'd been there and would have come after her. The front office called the police for her while she made her escape. It's my understanding that the man who hurt her was indeed her husband and was arrested at that hotel. I always wondered about her and whether she went back to him. Did her mom pick her up that night? Is she safe now? And while it hasn't happened since, I'm pretty sure that if I ever tell my husband that there's a body on the side of the road, he'll be much more likely to listen without question. I just have to get this story off my chest, as it's one that I still find so messed up, and it creeps me out to this day. It all came flooding back to me tonight, just like it happened yesterday. My then wife and I used to visit her parents in a state up north, about a 4-hour drive from us. They lived in an old, nice big house with rolling green hills in the backyard and big oak trees all around the property. We always stayed in the apartment above the garage, but this trip, they told us that they were renovating the apartment and had us stay in one of the bedrooms within the house. We usually stayed for a few days, so we brought luggage with us. That night, my wife was downstairs with her parents, and I was upstairs in our room, putting clothes in the dresser, when I came across some pictures in the bottom drawer. These pictures were not in family photo albums. They were just loose in one of the drawers, although I'm pretty sure they were not meant to be found. They were pictures of my father-in-law inserting objects into my mother-in-law. Now, on its surface, already something messed up, but here are the 3 things that were really f***ed up about these pictures. 1, these objects weren't your standard play toys that most of us are used to. He was inserting a tennis racket, a wine bottle in another photo, I think a stuffed animal, and some other f***ed up stuff. Needless to say, I freaked out. I didn't look at any more of the photos, just quickly put them back into the drawer that I found them in. The second creepy thing about the pics were the smiles they had on their faces. Both of them. It was almost like they were, I don't know, like they had extended smiles. Like in the horror movies, where a girl's lips are cut on each side to make her smile wider. Or that creepy clown on the American Horror Story. Just seriously nutty smiles. Almost as if they were painted on their faces. What the f*** did I just see? Now, I know that no one was around when I was looking at them, or standing in the doorway watching me. This adds relevance to what I'm about to tell you in a bit. But the third messed up thing about these pics is that her dad was retired from a very high-profile job, and they were both very conservative people. I could never, ever see him doing something like that, let alone her mom participating in it. Okay, so I walked downstairs, still freaking a bit, but managed, with some alcohol, to have dinner with everyone and save some face. I remember everything was normal, like any other time we visited. The night wrapped up like any other time, and we went to bed later that evening. During the night, I was woken up by something that freaked me out even more. My mother-in-law was standing at our doorway, just staring at me, with that same f***ed up smile. What makes it worse? She was holding a wine bottle and a fucking tennis racket. I flipped right there. I couldn't move though. I felt almost paralyzed. I closed my eyes tight, and when I opened them, she was gone. My wife was still sleeping, snoring even, and I didn't have it in me to wake her. Now, I'll admit, this felt real. This seemed so real. I wasn't drunk at all, but it's up for debate whether it was in my head or not. Although if I had to stake my life on it, she was absolutely there in that doorway. At the time, I had all those questions in my head like, did she see me looking at the pics? That's too crazy coincidental. And I fucking know all of them were downstairs at the time that I was looking. Anyway, the next morning, I'm the last one up and head downstairs for breakfast. As I'm buttering up my toast that morning, I realized that my wife is really mad at me. It was a little out of character because she seemed to pick a fight with me for no reason. I think it was about the supposed shoddy job that I did building a wall at her parents' house the previous summer. But that was bullshit. She knew it, they knew it, and I knew it. I do very good work, but she kept on about it. And her parents just sat there, kind of smiling, all the while we were arguing like it was nothing. I remember looking at all of them like, what the fuck is going on here? It's something that felt like a big conspiracy. Me and my wife never argued like that before, and even if I built that wall with cardboard, something like that would have never turned into the argument that it did. We were all rather laid-back people, and that would have been a joking kind of thing, but my wife was on a different level that morning, and her parents were like twice as weird, just sitting there the way they were. Her parents' demeanor freaked me out even more than the yelling act my wife was putting on. I felt somewhere between pissed off and traumatized by then by the whole situation. So I went upstairs, packed my things, and left the house. Mind you, with no objection from the wife or the in-laws. Not a word, which was super weird in and of itself. I got into the car and ended up driving back home 4 hours by myself, getting more and more creeped out with each mile. My anxiety built. Was it the fucking pictures? Did her mom manipulate the whole thing because of her weird American Horror Story ass the night before? No phone call from the wife the whole way home. No contact, no nothing. I did leave a "what the f*** is wrong with you people today" message on her parents' landline. It was 100% weird in that kitchen that morning. By the time I made it home, I remember I was ready to leave my wife for sure, and I knew that I never ever wanted to see my in-laws again, even though I liked them both a lot before, and we seemed to get along really well. My wife came home a couple days later, I think. We made up on the phone, and she apologized, I think, but I wasn't there by the time she got back to the house. Long story made short, we ended up getting a divorce not long after that. She never did really explain why she jumped on me like that morning, but by then, I didn't care how much we invested in that marriage, or how beautiful she was, or how much I still loved her. Overall, I was just too creeped out, and I knew things probably would never be the same again, at least in my head. I never did see my in-laws or my ex-wife again, or ever tell her what I saw in the drawer that evening. It's been almost 2 decades now. I suppose, in a way, it's too late for answers now. This incident happened to me when I was 15 years old, back in 1999. I grew up in Southern California, in the suburbs of Los Angeles. We had moved to our home when I was about 6 years old. I lived with my mom, 3 brothers, and little sister. I'm the middle child, which wasn't very easy as a kid. I often felt overlooked. I also have ADHD and high-functioning autism, which made me feel even more isolated. I'll give you guys an overview of my town and house so you can get an idea of where I grew up. When we moved there, our city was pretty much all dirt roads and citrus orchards. It was common to see coyotes, deer, rattlesnakes, and even mountain lions. Our house was up a road that looked like a dead-end street, but the street curved around and led into our neighborhood. It was remote and creepy. Our house was the second house on our street. I guess you could say it was your typical middle-class neighborhood. We had a huge canyon behind our house, literally right next to the fence of our backyard. We loved to play in the canyon as kids. There was a big river in the canyon that my siblings and I would ride our boogie boards down. There were even small waterfalls to play in, and small fish and frogs in the river to catch. Now, as an adult, I cringed to think of how I'd go down into that canyon alone at such a young age. When I was about 10, the police discovered a dead body in the lake down in the canyon and ended up building a dam and drained the lake. We weren't able to play in our beloved river anymore. I guess it was for the best though. Years later, I discovered that wasn't the first body they'd found down there in the canyon. They ended up draining it because someone kept dumping bodies into the lake. In the 3rd grade, I also had a friend who lived down the street from me, who happened to be murdered. I guess her dad left the house for business, and the mom and children were murdered while he was gone. They never did solve the case. They also never solved those cases involving the dead bodies in the canyon behind our house either. Anyway, back to the house. We had a pretty big yard, and even had a goat, horses, a pig, cats, and dogs. I think you get the idea. We also had a big barn that was up against the canyon where our animals would be kept at night. We had a steep driveway, and our street was also pretty steep, as it led up to the mountains by my house. Between our home and the rest of the neighborhood was a trail, kind of a slab of land with overgrown shrubbery, with a huge electrical tower in the middle of the trail. The bushes along the path were really tall and overgrown, which added to the creepiness of the neighborhood. All the kids at my school considered our street to be the creepiest street in town. The previous owner of our house happened to die there. Yes, actually died in the master bedroom. I have no idea why my mom even bought the house. I bet she must have gotten a killer deal on it. All jokes aside though, I really hated that house. I never truly felt safe in it and moved out as soon as I turned 18. It It was a tri-level style home, so the layout was kind of weird. We had a pretty sturdy front door that creaked when you'd open it. The living room, kitchen, and dining room were all on the first level of the house. The tri-level part of the first floor led down some stairs into our family room, and then to a small hallway and the bathroom. My bedroom was next to the bathroom downstairs. My room was kind of tucked away in a weird spot of the hallway. There was a little piece of wall that obscured my view into the family room from my bedroom doorway. Another weird aspect of the house was there was a huge cutout in the wall of the kitchen. So it was essentially a window built into the kitchen wall that overlooked the family room. I could see into the kitchen from the hallway where my room was, thanks to this pointless wall cutout. The house was built somewhere around the 1970s, and my parents had done some very strange renovations over the years. Now, let me get to the actual scary experience here. So again, my bedroom was the only bedroom on the first floor. Everyone else's bedrooms were upstairs. My mom had given me the downstairs bedroom so I wouldn't have to share a room with my little sister anymore, because I'd have full-blown panic attacks when my sister would mess up the bedroom. I liked being downstairs because I enjoyed being alone. I'm a proud hermit and introvert. But I'm not gonna lie, it was scary as at night being all alone downstairs. I'd often sleep with my dog in my room and close my bedroom door. I'd usually lock the door because I'm that paranoid type of person. Any other neurodivergent listeners will understand what I mean. Intrusive thoughts are a bitch. Late one night, my dog was scratching at the door, probably wanting to get out and get a drink from his water bowl down the hall. I also forgot to mention that the house had 2 back doors. One led directly into my restroom from outside, and the other led directly into our laundry room. Again, I know it's a weird setup. Both doors had locks, but they didn't even work half the time. Anyway, I had let my little doggo out of my room, and I could have sworn I'd shut my bedroom door and then gone back to sleep. I honestly never leave my door open when I sleep, not even a crack. I ended up waking up confused a few hours later. I looked at my clock, and it read 5 a.m., way too early to get up for school. I never woke up this early. I was also confused as to why I was hanging halfway off my bed. I always slept with my head on the left side of my bed, never the right. It was like someone had picked me up and laid me on the opposite side of my bed, in addition to kind of hanging off the side. Being autistic, I like things to be a very specific way every single night. Closed door, sleeping on the left side of my bed, alarm going off at 7 a.m. to wake me up for school. I rubbed my eyes, feeling confused and just kind of off. I felt weird, like something just wasn't right. I laughed to myself thinking I probably had a crazy dream and moved a lot in my sleep that night, which, by the way, wasn't something that happened to me. I looked around my room and I was very surprised to see my door was slightly cracked open. I was certain I had closed the door after letting my dog out. I suddenly felt wide awake. I still had this weird feeling though. I don't know why I didn't just go back to sleep. I felt like I needed to just get up quickly, get out of my room, and get ready for school, which I also never did this early. I walked towards my bedroom door and opened it. The house was still pitch black, except for the dim light my mom always kept on in the kitchen. As I walked out of my room, I went to turn to go into my bathroom, when I could have sworn I saw the figure of a man standing in the kitchen through that weird-ass wall cutout. I thought nothing of it, told myself I must still be half asleep. I brushed it off as best as I could and continued my way into the restroom. I locked the door behind me and quickly turned on the shower. After wrapping up my shower, I opened the bathroom door. I was surprised to see my mom standing right in front of me with her arms crossed and a scowl across her face. I looked at her befuddled and asked her what was wrong. She immediately started yelling at me, saying, "I told you not to have friends spend the night on school nights." She went on, and it left me utterly confused. I stopped my mom and told her I didn't have any friends over, and that I had no idea what she was talking about. She said I must be lying to her. In her defense, She had caught me sneaking in some of my friends through my bedroom window a few weeks prior to this. I kept telling her that I wasn't lying, and I started getting upset as she was accusing me of something that I definitely didn't do. She must have realized at some point that I might be telling the truth. All of a sudden, she got really quiet, looked pale, and her eyes got wide. "Do you promise you didn't have any friends over?" she said very calmly. Again, I said bluntly, "Yes, I promise. Why?" She just stood there staring at me. Again, I asked her what was wrong. She hesitated and then began speaking again. She told me she had woken up early, around 5 a.m. She was laying in bed reading a book when she heard me downstairs as I opened and shut the bathroom door and turned on the shower. Right after she heard me turn on the shower, she heard heavy footsteps move quickly across the wooden floors downstairs. She said it sounded like the person had heavy boots on as they moved from the kitchen all the way to the front door. She then heard the front door swiftly open and then close. My mouth dropped open and I just stared at her. I couldn't believe it. I told her that I saw a figure of a man in the kitchen while walking to the restroom, but thought that I was just seeing things. She didn't say anything else and walked off. Later that day, she changed the locks on all of the doors and even put latches on them. This incident made me hate our house even more. When this happened, my mom was going through a divorce with my stepdad, so she thought it might have been him or maybe even our really creepy next door neighbor. But after that night, I started making sure to lock my bedroom door and window every single night. We never found out who had come into our house early that morning. To this day, I still occasionally have nightmares about what could have happened. How did they get into the house? Were one of the doors unlocked? Why had they come down into my room? Did they watch me sleep? Why did they move me off my bed like that? And how did I not wake up as they moved me? Although my mom was awake when I was, she didn't hear a car start up or drive off. So, were they on foot? Did they come from the canyon? Did they hide along the sketchy trail in front of my house? These are just some of the questions I still continuously ask myself that scare me to my core. Another couple of which are, why did he leave my room to go to the kitchen? Was he coming back with a knife? They had left my door cracked open and then went to the kitchen. I truly believe the person was planning to come back to my room to do only God knows what. I have no idea why I felt so compelled to get up early that morning. I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't gone to the bathroom. I don't know who the hell it was, but the feeling in my soul tells me they didn't have good intentions. When I was 9 years old, my friends and I were playing the most epic birthday game of hide and go seek in the woods behind our neighborhood. I had found an amazing hiding spot in the backwoods and crouched down about as low as I could. I had a nice long view down the trail from both angles, so I knew there was no way for anyone to come sneaking up on me. I was hidden for a few minutes before I saw a man in a red flannel shirt come walking up the trail. I noticed that he was stumbling back and forth. In my teenage years, I'd be able to peg this as a man that's stone cold drunk. As he was far off, his facial features were blotted out due to the distance. However, as he got closer, his face never did quite unblot. The closer he got, the more distorted and out of focus his face became, until he was pretty much standing right up next to me. I noticed that he had absolutely no facial features whatsoever. Where his face should be was nothing but skin. Now, I must have moved or made some noise because the man stopped and looked at me. At least, his face turned towards me, and he said very softly and quite sincerely, "I'm sorry." I'm not sure what happened next. My next memory is booking it and being halfway home. I was so terrified of what I had just seen that I couldn't speak of it to anyone. I packed it away and then forgot all about it until I was in my mid-20s. At that point, I remember my mom telling us the story of a friend of hers from high school who had died recently and had once lived in our old neighborhood. When they were in high school, he tried to unalive himself by shooting himself in the head, but ended up surviving, although not without permanently disfiguring his face horrifically. After that, he became a horrible alcoholic, lived a very lonely life, and would walk through the woods as to purposefully not scare little kids after getting drunk at a dive bar named Vinny's Hotspot that happened to be on the opposite side of the woods, the direction which I saw that faceless man coming from. I realized only then that the man my mother was speaking of and the stranger I saw all those years ago were indeed one and the same. I put it in my head that this poor man was walking home from a binge of day drinking and ended up crossing paths with me in the woods. And as a means to protect myself, my brain somehow unsaw his face from my memory so that I wouldn't be too horrified at the experience. My heart breaks for this man. I can only imagine what a single, solitary, and horrifying life he must have led, both before and after his accident. I'm not one of those people that vehemently believes in the afterlife, but wherever this man is now, I hope that all of his pain has subsided and that he can just rest. This is my first post in this sub, so forgive me if this isn't quite the right place, but a few summers back, we had a series of unfortunate and creepy events. So buckle in, this is going to be a long one. In May, I moved into a new apartment on the second floor of a 4-story building. I'm a single mom of 2 younger kids. The pandemic was raging, and I was in the middle of not only a move, but a divorce and a huge career shift. My industry was off limits during the lockdown, and the state had yet to set up the unemployment system for independent contractors. Needless to say, I was stressed. All of the changes were stressful for my kids as well, and there was a fair amount of yelling and arguing from all of us for a few months. Being in an apartment building, the sound carries, and I was sure the new neighbors thought that I was a terrible mother. I had very briefly met our downstairs neighbor in passing a few times, and was relieved to find out she had a young child as well. Maybe she would be more understanding of the unavoidable kid noise than a single person would. It soothed my anxiety a bit about being a bad neighbor. Being in a pandemic, though, we didn't interact much, except for brief hellos in the hallway. Fast forward to September, things had calmed down quite a bit for us. We were settled in now, my finances were stable, and the kids were more used to being stuck with each other all of the time. There were still occasional spats, but nothing out of the ordinary for a normal family. So you can imagine my surprise when one day I came home from work to find a card and a gift bag in front of my door. They would have to be from someone who had a key to the building, but I still didn't really know any of my neighbors, so what the hell was it? I was immediately wary and had a sinking feeling in my chest. As soon as I picked up the bag, I could tell it was a bottle of wine, and the card was thick and heavy. Normally, I would be excited about such a gift, but my spidey senses were already through the roof that something was off, and I was getting nauseous. As soon as I got inside, I opened the card. It was from the downstairs neighbor. She told me that she was my children's guardian angel, and that this was a warning to me, that I had no right to harm them, and I needed to relax. Now, seeing as how I had never laid a hand on my children, I was confused, angry, offended. Had she mistaken the kids' roughhousing for me beating my children? And I am a pretty chill person. Helping other people to relax is literally my full-time job. So her telling me I needed to relax nearly made me laugh out loud. I was floored, creeped out, and still had some major bad vibes. I think I would have probably just completely ignored it, but seeing as how I'm going through a divorce with a bit of a custody disagreement, I couldn't really afford to have some weirdo call the cops on me for no reason at all. I had no idea what to do, but I was almost panicked at this point. So I went to my room and pulled out my tarot cards. I took a few deep breaths to calm my mind, shuffled, and concentrated on the situation before drawing a single card. It was the Nine of Swords. Now, if you're not familiar with tarot, here's what it looks like. A woman sitting up in her bed, head in her hands, weeping. There are 9 swords hung horizontally on the wall behind her. It's one of the ugliest, most ominous cards in the whole system, and represents despair, depression, anxiety, and intense emotional struggle. I took it as a sign to keep my distance, but I couldn't just ignore it. She lives right downstairs and thinks that I'm abusing my children. I couldn't just let it slide. So I wrote her a note back, saying that I appreciate her concern for them, assuring her that they're safe, explaining that not only do they roughhouse quite a bit, but my oldest has several disabilities that affect his speech and balance, so she may hear him shouting and falling quite a bit. I gave her my number and told her to text me if we were ever being too loud. I slipped the note under her door and hoped for the best. Still feeling majorly freaked out about the whole situation, I burned the card she gave me and threw the bottle of wine in the dumpster. I couldn't even have them in the house. A few days later, I get a text from her. She said she was sorry to have misunderstood the situation, and it seems we have much more in common than she thought. She believed we were, quote, destined to become great friends, and invited my kids and I to join her and her son at the zoo. My intuition was still on high alert. I wanted so badly to say no, but was unsure how I could do that without just making things really awkward. And I didn't want to do that since I would still have to see her all the time. So I told her truthfully that between me being back to work and my kids doing virtual school, there was no time for at least the next few weeks. We never settled on a date, but I did leave it open. The next night, around 9:30 p.m., I got another text from her. I opened it up, and it was literally the longest text message I had ever received. So long that Apple had somehow sent it via iMessage as its own document. Even having worked in tech support for Apple, I had never seen this happen. It was a novel, and it was a bad one. She essentially poured her heart out, telling me about her husband, this beautiful black man who was built like a brick house, had been cheating on her for years, that she had recently quit her job and stopped taking her meds, and that soon she was going to leave her husband and go on a long vacation and learn how to swim. She told me that her son was perfect and a genius, and that it was his destiny to tutor my son, who, again, is disabled, but not behind on his schoolwork. She told me her mother and husband had tried to work together to have her committed just because she didn't believe in God anymore and began buying crystals. That her husband would rather she, a white woman, call the cops and he, a black man, die by their hand than go to therapy with her. That all her son wanted in the whole world was to go outside and blow bubbles with my kids. That she would even be willing to babysit them to give me a break. I did not respond. I decided it was best to just keep my boundaries and steer clear of her. And surprisingly, I was successful. I never got another message from her after that. Never saw her in the hallway. But I was living on edge, wondering when I would see her, what she would say or do, and this went on for about 6 weeks like that. Well, early October, I'm falling asleep reading in my bed at about 10:30 p.m. one night. I hear sirens. Living in a big city, this in and of itself is normal, and it didn't even register to me that they had stopped in front of my building until I heard yelling outside. Still, whatever's happening is none of my business. I ignore it. Then I hear yelling downstairs, through the floor. I've never heard a single sound through the floor. It had been 6 weeks from my neighbor's last message, but immediately I thought, oh my God, this is it. It's happening. She called the cops on her husband. In quick succession, I thought of him being a black man at odds with the police. I couldn't help but think of Breonna Taylor's murder and how their bullets went into neighboring apartments. I thought of my kids sleeping in the next room. I jumped up and looked out the window, trying to get a sense of what was happening. Police had the street blocked off. There were at least 4 squad cars and an ambulance. More cops were coming, running full speed into the building. I could still hear yelling coming from downstairs. The entire time, I'm freaking out. Do I wake up my kids and run them out the back door? Take them up to the top floor and the other side of the building? After pacing for a second, I run back to the window just in time to see a flood of cops booking it out of the building, holding something. The ambulance then tears away full speed. Then 2 cops run out with her in cuffs, throw her into a second waiting ambulance, and pull away. Another cop runs up to the building and starts wrapping the whole place in crime scene tape. My windows being open and only being on the 2nd floor, I can hear a group of cops consoling each other, saying things like, "You did what you could," and "preservation of life." Within 10 minutes, the street is absolutely flooded with onlookers, news crews, higher-up police. Between hearing what they were saying and alerts from the Citizen app, I was able to piece it together. The neighbor had taken her child's life and then attempted to take her own. The police found her sitting in her bed, crying, cutting herself. 9 of swords. Nobody on the block got much sleep that night. The next day was all helicopters and news crews and a slowly growing memorial of candles and signs and balloons and toy dinosaurs. I was exhausted, devastated, trying to keep my kids from seeing the circus, unsure how to handle it all. I reached for my tarot cards once again, this time a different deck. I had a very strong feeling that there was one card that wanted to be seen, and it would be easy to find. So I pulled the deck out of the box, shuffled, and picked a card. It didn't resonate at all. I picked another, but same thing. This wasn't the card I thought was coming. I'm just tired, I thought. I go to put the cards back and realize there is a single card that's still hanging out in the box. They hadn't all come out when I dumped it into my hand. I stared at it for a second and then reached in. 9 of swords. The weeping woman in her bed, surrounded by sharp objects. I threw it down on my bed and simply walked away. While this is something that happened a few years back now, I can't help but think of it every now and then. We still live in the same apartment to this day. I walk by that neighbor's door relatively often, and although several other occupants have come and gone in time, I can't tell you anything about them. I only ever remember that woman, her kid, a novel of a text message that offered some clue of her delusion, and that fateful night that she erased pretty much all of that from this earth. I didn't follow her case after that night. I don't know where she's at now. Prison, some hospital somewhere. But in my heart, I hope that she got all the help that she could. I can't imagine her existence being very enjoyable after having to face the fact that she extinguished the life of someone that she gave life to in the first place. When I was 10, my mom, stepdad, sister, and I lived on a 10-house cul-de-sac right off of a very busy street in our small home city of Mandeville, Louisiana, about 30 minutes across the Causeway Bridge from New Orleans. One warm summer afternoon, I was playing outside in the front yard with our weenie dog, who was such a barker that we actually named him Woofits. Anyway, Woofits and I were playing out front around maybe 5 p.m. or so it was still light out. I was wrapped up in chasing my pooch around the yard, so I didn't notice a black sedan pulling up in front of my house at first. The sound of the car's parking gear is what keyed me into its presence, just as a middle-aged man that I had never seen before got out of the driver's seat and started walking towards me. Without even a greeting, this guy began asking me if Gary was here. This caught me off guard because nobody named Gary lived in my house, or even this entire neighborhood. Like I said, my family had one of the 10 houses on this block, and we pretty much knew all of our neighbors. I responded by telling him that I didn't know anyone by that name around here, and that he may have his locations mixed up. But as I'm telling him this, he continues to walk closer and closer to me, asking if I would just hop in his car real quick and help him find Gary's house. With each step he takes, he's going deeper into his story about how Gary is one of his teenage son's friends and that he was unable to get a hold of him, but he was sure that he lived nearby. I repeatedly told the guy no, and that I didn't know anything that would help him. Keep in mind, Wolfitz is going berserk through this entire interaction and causing a bit of a ruckus. As this man gets to about 10 feet from me, he's now got his hand out, attempting to coax me into his grasp, all the while pleading with me to get into his car. That's when my mother, who was inside making dinner at the time, stormed out the front door to see what had our dog so up in paws. The instant that our screen door hit the wall of our porch, my mom began yelling at Wolfitz to stop barking. That's when that man glanced up and caught eyes with my mother. Before she could get another word from her mouth, he turned tail and hopped right back into the car before speeding off towards the main street, screeching his tires all the way down the road. My mom came down to the front yard, knelt in front of me, and with more than just a touch of worry in her voice, asked me what had happened. I told her that Wolfitz and I were playing when that man pulled up and asked me to help him find Gary. I remember I could barely finish that explanation before my mom pulled me in for a big hug and ushered me back inside our home. After that day, I wasn't allowed to play outside without an adult present anymore. You'd think that would be the end of this story, right? But no. For the next week, every afternoon around 4:30 p.m., that same sedan would be on our street in some capacity, either driving down the street slowly, parked in front of our neighbor's house, or brazenly parked across our driveway. This is something that I noticed because our living room window faced the street, and since I wasn't allowed outside for playtime like before, I had the perfect vantage point while watching afternoon cartoons. I pointed this out to my parents, and they ended up reporting it to the police, but like so many other stories here, nothing ever came of it. After that week, I don't believe I ever saw that car or that man again. 10-year-old me wondered why he kept coming back. I told him there was no Gary here. But 33-year-old me knows that he was coming back looking for another chance to try and lure me into his car. Alarm bells weren't sounding as he got closer to me that day, and I'd hate to think what could have happened if my mom didn't come out that door when she did. I know it would have been big trouble for little me, though. I was 18 years old and worked in a mall clothing store. I usually worked the night shift, which meant leaving the store between 9 and 9:30 p.m. None of us thought anything about calling out goodnight and walking out to our cars alone. Usually the parking lot was full of all the other workers leaving at the same time. On this particular night, I was in a great mood. I had had a good evening at work and was going to meet up with my boyfriend when I got home, so I was just smiling and thinking to myself as I walked. I got to the curb in front of the mall exit door to check for oncoming cars before I crossed over to where my car was parked. It wasn't that far away, maybe 10 spaces from the front. When I glanced up to verify where my car was, I caught the eyes of a man sitting in his truck. He was wearing a cowboy hat that was pulled down low over his eyes, as though trying to conceal his face, but I could tell that he was staring intently, right back at me. I froze in place, and I have never felt fear like I did in that very moment. I snapped out of my trance and ran as fast as I could past this truck and to my car, which was only spaces away. This was a little bit before key fob, so I needed my keys to unlock the door. I had always made fun of scary movies when the girl ran and dropped the keys trying to get in, but it really does happen that way. I was shaking badly, and I could not get the key in the door, and then I dropped the damn things. I felt like I was in a bad movie, when seconds later, I made it into the car and still found myself shaking. I had to sit there for a moment or two before I could safely drive off. This man didn't chase me. He didn't leave, but he continued to sit there as I exited. Later in the evening, after I'd finally calmed down, I felt like an idiot, thinking I had gotten scared of someone's husband picking them up after work. The next day, I went back to work, same night shift, and told everyone at work what had happened and how scared I had been. I made fun of myself for being such a chicken, but I made sure that someone walked out with me later that night. I stood at the door of the mall, ready to run back in if I saw anything off, but that man and his truck weren't there. I exhaled, and my friend and I went to our cars, relieved that everything was okay. The following day at work, there was no talk of my fright from 2 nights previous, and it was business as usual. About halfway into my shift, the manager of my store walks up to me and said that she needed to speak with me. She turned around and walked up to a cop that I had not noticed was in the store. Curious, I walked over, and my manager wanted me to tell the cop about what had happened a few nights previous. I felt silly telling him for some reason, because nothing had really happened. When I finished telling him my story, he started asking questions about the truck. Did I know what model it was? Exact color? Did I have an idea of the year? I finally said something about I didn't want to get anyone in trouble, and that I had just freaked out a little bit, but it was no big deal. The cop then explained that the night before, one of the ladies leaving for the evening had been kidnapped, driven around to the back of the mall into an unlit area, and was both beaten and raped. I felt myself getting lightheaded, and my vision went black for a moment, with it dawning on me that I had seen that rapist. My description of the truck matched the description of the victim. Her guy was not wearing a cowboy hat, and that was the only difference in our descriptions. That was only the beginning. We learned only a few days later that our city now had a serial rapist on the loose, and it took the authorities years to finally catch him. Turns out, this guy's wife figured out it was her husband and turned him in. That was a scary time, and women were terrified to be out alone after dark. At our mall, and I imagine in other places as well, no one was allowed to leave alone. The mall parking lot was now lit up 360 degrees, and they had security on site making sure that we were all safe. All of us mall workers started a chain call between the stores to let one another know if you saw anyone that looked suspicious or were frightened, so that everyone else would be on guard. Even to this day, and regardless of what anybody else has told me, I still feel guilty for that woman being attacked. "21 years old and female here. I don't know how long this story will be. It took me about 4 days to be able to actually type this one out. I got weird mini anxiety attacks when I tried. I'll be the first to admit that in the past, I've had a very can't happen to me type complex. Although I think this story kind of shook that out of me. I'm a university student, and I live in a rental house with 5 other people. It's far from ideal, but in this housing challenged world that we're living in, it takes that sting off of us having to pay a bunch of money a month to exist in a box. This has relevancy, I swear. I got extremely lucky last weekend when my 5 roommates were all out for the weekend. This has never happened, so I was ecstatic to have the house all to myself. I did all the 21-year-old girl home alone stuff you can think of. Watching movies with the volume loud, taking long-ass showers, walking around the house without a bra, etc., etc. It was around 10 p.m. Friday night. I had finished some homework and was relaxing with a glass of wine and watching some streaming services. From my comfy spot on the couch, it sounded briefly like there was something moving on the porch. We've had a fox in our front yard before, and the thing used to make a lot of noise on the porch, so I assumed that to be the case. After hearing some fumbling around for the second time, I went over to check through the window, but I didn't see a thing. As I'm turning to head back to the living room, a piece of cement flies through our kitchen window, although at the moment, I had no idea that it was cement. I think I peed myself a little bit when it happened, but I definitely screamed like the little girl at heart that I am. My moronic ass started unlocking the door to go outside, but common sense seized control of me again, and I quickly relocked the door. I also ran to the back door to make sure that it was still locked, even though it's glass and wouldn't make a difference. Oddly enough, at this time my grandma's words came into my head about something her own mother had told her. If someone tries breaking into your house, turn the lights off. You know the inside of your house much better than they do. I shut the lights off in the living room and managed to turn the TV off, which was especially hard because my hands were shaking. My dad used to give me and my siblings advice on protection measures, although these were not resonating with me at the time. I secured myself in my upstairs bedroom and had turned all of the lights out in the house as I passed them. While walking up the stairs, I could hear the doorknob shaking furiously on the front door. I don't know if there was more than one person trying to get in, or if they realized they couldn't jump the fence to get into the backyard. While using speakerphone to call for emergency services, I secured my hunting knife to the end of my hockey stick with hot pink duct tape. I know, that's probably one of the most Canadian things I could say. If I was going to have to use it, at least it would look fabulous. I stayed in the dark, holding my makeshift spear for what was probably about 15 minutes, alone in my dark room, facing the door, with my hunter's knife attached to my Easton stick. The operator told me the police were coming, which they eventually did. It took a very unsettling amount of time to get there. The only reason I left my bedroom in the first place was because I heard knocking on the door downstairs and saw the police lights flashing through the window. Otherwise, someone would have had to come in and physically pull me out of that room. Statement was given, but that's all they did. Literally, all they did. I think we get this picture in our mind that there's going to be dusting for fingerprints and caution tape and things like that, but I now know that's strictly Hollywood stuff. A very nice female officer stayed with me in the house and helped me clean up the glass until my brother showed up to bring me to his place for the rest of the weekend. So, shout out to Officer Cutie with the tattoos. I made an appointment with a doctor to get on anxiety medicine, as well as medicine for some nightmares that I'm having. I know that now I'm not in any sort of physical danger, but I've had some very charming dreams about similar scenarios, and I was just finding it easier to stay awake. Maybe that's juvenile of me, but I'm only human. Meds are working fine, and I'm back at my house with wall-to-wall people again. And honestly, I can't say that I hate it so much anymore.